Shanks is on his knees in the mud, a Yonko, bleeding out on a shattered coastline that looks like Marineford, and God Valley had a baby and then blew it up. His sword is snapped in half, his coat is torn, and the air around him is screaming. Because Blackbeard is standing over him. Darkness is pouring off Teach's body like a living storm. Yami tendrils crawl across the ground, swallowing shattered boulders and broken weapons, while invisible shockwaves from the Gura Gura no Mi twist the horizon itself. Every step he takes toward Shanks makes the earth crack. Every breath he takes makes the sky groan. In the original timeline, these two were kept apart. Shanks walked into Marineford and stopped a war. He stared Blackbeard down and said, "Not yet." The story held its breath. But what if that moment was never a warning? And instead, it was a promise? What if the next time they met, there was no Marine, no referee, no escape, just a battlefield where one emperor had to die? In this timeline, we don't cut away. There is no off-screen implication, no vague newspaper headline. Everyone sees it. The red-haired pirates are scattered and crushed around their captain. Ben Beckman's rifle is cracked. Lucky Roo is pinned under rubble. Yasop is screaming, reaching out, watching that darkness wrap around Shanks' body as Blackbeard raises a quake-coated fist for the final blow. And then it happens. The man who once bet his arm on a kid from Fuchsia Village is erased in front of the world. Not by the Marines, not by some random Yonko, by Marshal D. Teach, the man destined to be Luffy's final enemy, the walking black hole of the Great Pirate Era. As Marineford was one of the most legendary battles in One Piece history, a war that changed everything. Ace's death shattered Luffy. But here's the kicker. Shanks' death doesn't just break a little brother's heart, it shatters the entire balance of the seas. This isn't one commander falling. This is a pillar of the Yonko system being ripped out and swallowed into darkness. Instantly, the questions start. What happens when the most disciplined Yonko crew is decapitated? Do the red-haired pirates collapse? Or does Beckman lead a suicidal revenge crusade? How hard does the world government panic when the guy they already feared suddenly absorbs Shanks' territory, his influence, and the legend attached to that straw hat? Because you see, this isn't just a power-up for Blackbeard. This is a narrative hijack. And the man who inspired Luffy's dream is killed by the man standing at the end of Luffy's path. So what does that do to Luffy's journey? Does he charge into the new world consumed by rage? Or does this trauma twist the joy of Nika into something far more unstable? Ladies and gentlemen, if the Red Emperor falls here, on this ruined battlefield, does the new era still belong to Luffy? Or has Teach just stolen the Great Pirate Era itself? Let's dive into how the world reacts when Shanks' blood becomes the trigger for the darkest timeline. Choosing the kill zone. When and where Blackbeard strikes. To answer that, we need to lock in the kill zone. When does Blackbeard actually make his move? And where does Shanks fall? Because depending on the era, the entire timeline bends in a completely different direction. And first candidate, an alternate Marineford ending. Picture this. In the original timeline, Shanks walks onto the battlefield, stops Akainu, calls off the war, and everyone barely escapes with their lives and trauma. But what if, right there, as the smoke is clearing and Ace's body is still warm, Teach refuses to back down? Instead of retreating after showing off the Gura Gura no Mi, he challenges Shanks on the spot. Marineford becomes not the end of a war, but the opening act of Blackbeard versus the Red Hair Pirates, with the entire world as an audience. Second candidate, a final war ambush near Laugh Tale. Imagine the endgame. The road poneglyph race is over. Everyone has reached the last island, and Shanks is closer than ever to the truth Roger left behind. That's when Blackbeard appears. On using his Yami Yami no Mi to drag ships into a black sea and erase the light from the sky. Shanks dies at the doorstep of the One Piece, turning the final war into a revenge story written in Emperor blood. But the most explosive option isn't at Marineford or at the very end. It's right after Wano. In this timeline, we plant the flag in the post-Wano, pre-Final War era. Why here? Because this is the moment when everything is unstable. Luffy has just toppled Kaido, awakened Gear 5, and stepped up as a Yonko. The old balance is shattered. Shanks has finally moved, saying he's going to meet a certain pirate. And Blackbeard? He's hunting road poneglyphs like a man possessed. Here's the kicker. This is the first time all three threads, Luffy's rise, Shanks' long-delayed motion, and Teach's hunger, are active at the same time. As in the original timeline, Shanks is moving toward Luffy, Blackbeard is attacking Amazon Lily, and the world is reacting to the new emperors. In this timeline, we keep all of that, right up until Teach changes his target. So our canon baseline is simple. Wano has ended. Luffy is recognized as an emperor. Kid and Law have shaken Big Mom. Shanks has left Elbaf waters to meet that certain pirate, and his crew is fully assembled. Ben Beckman, Yasopp, Lucky Roo, the entire disciplined monster squad. Meanwhile, Blackbeard has just assaulted Amazon Lily, clashed with Boa Hancock, and is actively hunting poneglyph rubbings through proxy crews and ambushes. Now we ask the real question. What if, instead of quietly maneuvering in the shadows, Teach decides it's time for his boldest move yet and chooses Shanks as his next victim? He diverts from chasing Hancock, Law, or Kid, and instead lays a trap on the route between Elbaf, Wano's aftermath, and that mysterious, certain pirate. Ladies and gentlemen, that choice becomes the spark for everything that follows. We're going to stack this scenario in layers. The immediate clash between Yami plus Gura and Peak Conqueror's Haki, the political shockwaves as one Yonko falls to another, Luffy's psychological spiral when the man who bet the future on him is murdered. And finally, how the shape of the last war against the world government and Blackbeard's crew is completely changed. Because once we fix the kill zone here, every inherited will, Roger's, Whitebeard's, Shanks, and even Luffy's, gets rewritten. And next, we'll step onto that battlefield and break down how the fight itself unfolds. From Scar to Showdown, the hidden history between Shanks and Teach. And to understand how brutal that rewrite gets, we need to talk about the man Shanks has been quietly waiting for all this time. Marshall D. Teach. Because this isn't a random matchup. This is a wound that's been festering in the story since before Chapter 1. You see, long before Marineford, long before Yonko titles and bounty posters in the billions, Shanks walked into Fuchsia Village with 3 fresh scars clawed across his eye. Oda never handholds us through that moment, but he gives us the answer in pieces. Those scars came from Blackbeard. From a man who, at that time, didn't even have a devil fruit. That detail is insane. In the original timeline, Shanks is already a hockey monster. He's already sailing with legends like Roger, and clashing with monsters like Mihawk. Yet this nobody under Whitebeard leaves a mark that never heals. So what does that tell you about Teach? That he was always dangerous, always patient, always hiding teeth behind that goofy laugh. And Shanks, of all people, never forgot. Fast forward to Marineford. Whitebeard is dead, Ace is gone, the war is supposed to be over. Then Blackbeard strolls in, steals the Gura Gura no Mi, and suddenly, the battlefield belongs to him. But just as he's about to declare a new era, Shanks appears and cuts the entire war short with a single line. In the original timeline, he tells Teach, "If you're scared, then step down." And Teach, who just humiliated the world government, actually does back off. Here's the kicker. Shanks also says it's not yet time for their fight. And that's Oda looking straight at us and saying, this clash is reserved for the critical moment. Shanks the stabilizer versus Blackbeard the destabilizer. One Yonko keeps the balance of the seas, stopping Kaido from attacking Marineford, holding back full-scale chaos. The other exploits every crack in that balance, from Ace's capture to Whitebeard's death, to climb the ladder through pure opportunistic darkness. And at the center of that tug-of-war is Luffy. Shanks bets everything on Luffy's future, trusting the straw hat, the D initial, and that wild, liberating spirit. Blackbeard believes in inherited will too, but in this twisted way, where dreams never die, means you can steal them from corpses, rip powers out of bodies, and hijack destinies that were never meant for you. Shanks nurtures a will. Teach harvests it. So what if? In this timeline, that long-teased confrontation doesn't end in a stalemate or a cool standoff, but in Shanks' actual death at Blackbeard's hands? If the man who protected Luffy's dream is murdered by the man who steals dreams, how violently does the story's core theme of inherited will get rewritten? And who does the next era really belong to when that red-haired safeguard is finally removed? Let's dive into the moment the Scarmaker comes to collect. Resetting the board. Canon timeline. Right before the kill. Let's dive into the exact world Blackbeard is about to break. We're post-Wano. The rooftop drums have faded. Kaido and Big Mom have literally been punched out of the Yonko throne, and the seas are in a free-for-all. Luffy has just been crowned an emperor, knows the 5th gear god of chaos sailing around with a 3 billion bounty and 0 interest in slowing down. Cross Guild is putting bounties on Marines, Buggy's face is accidentally becoming the new symbol of pirate anarchy, and the Navy? You see, they're stretched to the limit. In the original timeline, the Shichibukai system is gone, replaced by Vegapunk's SSG and the Seraphim. Admirals are babysitting weaponized child warlords, the Holy Knights are looming, and every island feels the pressure. This is the age where even the world government is acting scared. That's the board, ladies and gentlemen, right before we flip it. Now look at Shanks. He appears just off the coast of Wano, his shadow literally framing Luffy's new era. And he decides not to meet him. Why? Because Shanks isn't here to fanboy over the kid. He's here to move pieces. He turns away from Wano, tells his crew it's finally time to claim the One Piece, and then does something even more suspicious. He walks straight into the room with the Gorosei. He talks to the five elders about a certain pirate. We don't get a name. We only see that these old monsters actually listen. In the original timeline, that meeting is a quiet warning, a political play from the one Yonko who can walk into Mary Joai's and leave alive. But what if that certain pirate is already on the hunt for him too? Because while Shanks is playing diplomat and kingmaker, Blackbeard is moving like a shark that smells blood. He hits Amazon Lily, clashes with Boa Hancock, and tries to steal her powers on the spot. His obsession is clear. Powerful devil fruits, seraphim leverage, anything that multiplies his threat level instantly. Whereas at the same time, he's raiding islands, chasing road poneglyph rubbings, and expanding his grip on key territories like Hachinosu. So the Yonko balance becomes a powder keg. Shanks is the disciplined stabilizer, the man whose hockey and reputation keep idiots from starting Marineford too. Blackbeard is the chaotic climber, stacking stolen fruits in darkness. Luffy is the wild card who laughs his way into emperor status. Buggy is the accidental symbol who turns clown energy into a global brand of fear. Here's the kicker. Our divergence hits the moment Shanks finally meets Luffy. In this timeline, their long-awaited reunion happens. Shanks entrusts Luffy with the era, then sets sail to make a decisive move against the world government itself. But on the route to that clash of kings, Teach is waiting in the dark, ready to kill a legend before he can rewrite the rules. The divergence, an ambush in the New World, so picture this. The red force cutting across a brutal New World current, waves towering like mountains, sea kings lurking below, sky split by thunder. Shanks is on the deck, sack in hand, laughing with his crew. Relaxed, but you see, he's not careless. His hockey is sweeping the horizon, and his resolve is sharper than ever after finally seeing Luffy again and entrusting him with the future. They've just left that emotional reunion behind. In the original timeline, Shanks keeps moving like a phantom emperor, subtly steering the world away from total collapse, picking his moments, avoiding pointless bloodshed. But what if, in this timeline, his next move toward the world government is exactly what puts a target on his back for the one man who lives to shatter balance? Far away, in a hidden cove of the New World, Blackbeard's network is humming. Former pirates bought off with treasure, underworld brokers who owe him favors, even a few turncoat world government agents feeding him scraps. One report comes in. Shanks' route. His heading? The fact that he's sailing without any immediate marine shadow. No admirals, no holy knights. Just the red-haired pirates on a perilous lane that barely anyone survives. Here's the kicker. Teach understands timing better than almost anyone. He knows Marineford changed everything. He knows the final war is coming. Attack Shanks too late, and he faces a fully mobilized Yonko coalition and a Luffy who's truly ready. Attack Shanks now, and he can erase the symbol of restraint in the New World before that era fully ignites. In the original timeline, Teach goes island to island, hunting devil fruits, testing his new status as a Yonko, letting chaos spread while he stays just out of reach. But in this timeline, he escalates. Instead of targeting infrastructure, he targets ideology. He sets his sights on the red-haired emperor who walked into Marineford and said, "Stop," and made the world listen. The ambush is surgical at first, then apocalyptic. As Shanks' fleet enters a fog-choked stretch of sea, light suddenly dies. Torches snuff out. The sun above is swallowed. The Yami Yami no Mi spreads like a curtain, devouring light and even muffling sound, so cannon lookouts don't hear the enemy closing in until it's too late. Whilst the Red Force's hull groans as the sea itself begins to twist. Then the quakes hit. Gura Gura shockwaves slam into the ocean, splitting waves apart, tilting ships on their sides. Blackbeard's fleet erupts from the darkness in a full encirclement. Warships ahead, sniper nests on the flanks, titanic figures on the prows. Ben Beckman is already barking orders. Yasop's gun is up, Lucky Roo is bracing, but they're boxed in. Shanks steps to the rail. Conqueror's hockey flaring so hard, weaker pirates on both sides drop instantly. This was supposed to be his move against the world government. Instead, he's been dragged into a death match he didn't initiate, and here's where the timeline snaps. In the original timeline, Shanks keeps his powder dry, choosing when to reveal his full hand. But in this timeline, Teach forces the clash early. When in the middle of the sea, with no neutral ground, no marine interference, and no way for either emperor to walk away without someone's legend ending right here. Haki versus darkness, breaking down Shanks and Blackbeard's power matchup. Shanks doesn't answer with words. The sea itself answers for him. Instantly, that invisible pressure we saw at Marineford comes crashing down. You see, this is the same man whose conqueror's haki made giants, veterans, and even admirals freeze for a second. The same presence that stopped the war with a walk and a sentence. In Wano's aftermath, that haki reaches all the way to Green Bull and makes a literal admiral retreat without Shanks even stepping on land. No devil fruit, no gimmicks, just willpower bending the battlefield. And that's the first big problem for Teach. And to Blackbeard's Yami. Yami no Mi is broken against devil fruits. He can drag Logias out of intangibility, shut down Whitebeard's quake powers, and turn any fruit user into a regular human with one grab. In the original timeline, that's what lets him clown Ace, and then snatch the Gura Gura at Marineford. But what if the guy in front of him doesn't rely on a fruit at all? Darkness can't turn off haki. It can't erase killing intent. Suddenly, this isn't a classic Logia matchup. This is a brawler with a reality-warping cheat code versus a swordsman who treats reality like it's made of glass. Let's dive into that clash. Teach swings with the Gura Gura no Mi, the same power that split the sky and nearly sank Marineford. Raw, apocalyptic damage. But here's the kicker. Whitebeard had decades of mastery and a body built to endure that recoil. Says Blackbeard? He screams when he gets stabbed. Every hit hurts him more. Every quake he forces through that body is a gamble. Against someone like Shanks, who can read movements with observation haki and punish tiny openings with pinpoint sword strikes, every second Teach spends charging a massive quake is another second his ribs, jaw, or neck are exposed. Shanks doesn't need to spam techniques. One clean hit with Conqueror's coating, like what Luffy used on Kaido, and Teach is tasting the deck. But this isn't a duel in a vacuum. Crews move the needle. The red-haired pirates are a disciplined sniper squad disguised as a Yonko crew. Ben Beckman has admirals hesitating with a single gun cock. Rue, Yasop, the officers. We're talking clean formations, instant support, no wasted motion. Blackbeard's side? Chaos, former impel-down monsters. Our corrupted marines, freaks with busted fruits. Their power is insane, but their synergy is wild and unpredictable, which means the battlefield turns into a storm of stray abilities, collapsing ships, and friendly fire. So what happens when Teach refuses a fair fight? What if he uses darkness to warp terrain, pulls Shanks into blind spots, lets his crew dogpile Ben and the others while he looks for one dirty opening? In a straight-up swordsman versus brawler duel, Shanks might edge him out. But in this timeline, Teach doesn't want a duel. He wants a disaster. And if the sea itself becomes his ally, not Shanks's, who walks away as the emperor of this new era? The first clash, red lightning versus black holes. So when Teach finally gets what he wants, and the sea turns against its own emperor, Shanks doesn't wait for the disaster to finish forming. He cuts straight into it. One heartbeat, there's distance. The next, he's there. Shanks instantly flashes across the shattered waves, blade already drawn, coated in that thick, crackling advanced Conqueror's haki. Red-black lightning screams off Griffin as he brings it down, and Teach throws up a swirling wall of darkness, Yami twisting like a living black hole while his free hand swells with the Gura's white cracks. Red lightning meets collapsing gravity. The clash doesn't just make sound, it erases it. For a split second, everything goes white and silent, and then the world roars back. The sky above them splits open like someone slashed it with a sword. Clouds sheared and shoved aside. The sea convulses, not in waves, but in slabs. In entire sections rising and dropping as quake shocks and haki pressure smash together, echoing Marineford's shockwaves and then just going past them. In the original timeline, Whitebeard's punches tilted the ocean. In this timeline, this duel makes the horizon itself look broken. Nearby ships? They're toys now. Massive pirate vessels and marine surveillance craft are tossed into the air, hulls groaning, masts snapping, crews hanging on for dear life as invisible forces shove them around. You see people who watched Marineford thinking they'd seen the peak, suddenly realizing that was just the trailer. Teach is in the center of it, laughing. Of course he is. Shanks's blade carves a line across his chest, haki burning into flesh that shouldn't be standing, and Blackbeard howls in pain and delight at the same time. He leans into it. He takes hits that would drop normal Yonko, letting Yami's gravity drag Shanks in close, fingers twitching with quake energy so he can blast him away point blank. Every time Shanks closes, the darkness claws at him, trying to swallow his movement, trying to nullify anything that isn't pure will. Every time Teach swings, the air itself turns into a hammer. But Shanks? He's calm brutality. No wasted words, no wasted steps. He's not here to show off. Every motion is a surgical strike. Tendons, joints, breathing patterns. He angles slashes to clip elbows, wrists, knees, trying to dismantle Teach's body before that monstrous endurance and that crew advantage can snowball into an unwinnable war. He's fighting like a man who knows he can't afford a long battle. Then, pattern break. We cut away mid-clash. In Marine surveillance, Den Mushi goes static, then refocus. Vice Admirals stare at the screens as the sky tears open, someone whispering that this makes Marineford look small. Underworld brokers in dark rooms freeze, recognizing that silhouette of red hair against the storm. And in Mariéjois, behind immaculate walls, the Gorosei lean in as reports confirm it. Red-haired Shanks and Marshal D. Teach have finally begun. Here's the kicker. Everyone understands this isn't just a Yonko turf fight. This is the opening note of the final era. So if this is what the first clash looks like, what does the aftermath do to the balance of the world? Crew versus crew. Red-haired discipline against Blackbeard's monsters. And the moment their auras collide, the crews move. Everyone knew this wasn't just Shanks versus Teach. And this was red-hair discipline against Blackbeard's monsters. And Ben Beckman is the one who makes sure that Duel stays untouched for as long as humanly possible. He doesn't charge, he points, he commands. In this timeline, Beckman is running the battlefield like a Marine Admiral without the uniform, barking orders that the red-haired pirates follow instantly, locking down firing lanes, creating a living wall between their captain and the chaos. You see snipers, brawlers, and swordsmen shifting like a drilled unit, every step calculated around one priority. No one interferes with Shanks. But what if the monsters on the other side refuse to play by those rules? Shiryu vanishes into the storm of dust and splinters, and suddenly it's assassin versus tactician. In the original timeline, we never saw Beckman really cut loose. And in this timeline, he's tracking Shiryu by the angle of raindrops and the pause between footsteps on shattered stone. Every time Shiryu blinks in to go for Shanks' flank, a bullet is already there, hockey-laced, forcing him to defend or bleed. It's not a flashy anime duel. It's a brutal chess match at gunpoint. Above them, Yasopp and Van Augur turn the sky into a sniper arena. Broken masts, chunks of cliff, even floating ship debris from the first clash become cover. Yasopp is reading killing intent. Van Augur is predicting trajectories like he's calculating fate itself. Shots crisscross the air, ricocheting off metal, exploding through wood, each one aimed at either disrupting Beckman's formation or protecting it. One stray bullet getting through here? That's Shanks' blind spot gone forever. And that's where Lucky Roo comes in. Every time a weird angle opens, every time a freak attack slips past the front line, a warped bullet, a warped body, a warped space, Roo is already there, meat in one hand, cannon or body slam in the other, literally throwing himself into Teach's cheap shots. He's the plug in every leak, the guy who turns surprise kill into failed gag panel through sheer presence. Here's the kicker. The contrast is insane. Red hair fights like a Yonko-led Marine elite unit. Tight formations, overlapping hockey, no one chasing glory. Blackbeard's crew, it's a feeding frenzy. Katarina Devon hunting trophies, Lafitte slipping behind throats, Sanjuan Wolf collapsing terrain just because he can. They're not covering each other, they're weaponizing each other's chaos. So Teach's side starts tilting the board. Avalanches of rubble force Beckman to break formation to save weaker allies. Quakes crack the ground under Yasopp's perch, splitting his line of sight. Van Augur snipes ropes so masts topple toward Shanks, forcing him to waste precious focus, slicing debris instead of Teach. Every distraction is a question. Does Shanks protect his men or press his advantage? At first, Red Hair answers both. They save everyone. They keep Teach back. But then a blade slips through and leaves a commander bleeding. A quake-twisted shockwave tags Shanks' ribs while he's glancing at his crew. A single moment of hesitation appears, and Blackbeard, smiling through broken teeth, is waiting for exactly that. As Beckman realizes they're losing the clean fight, you have to wonder, how long until someone actually reaches Shanks' back and the duel stops being one-on-one forever? The turning point. When Shanks realizes this isn't his fight to win that hesitation, that single glance away from Teach, that's the moment the entire fight changes. Because Shanks doesn't just feel a punch coming, he feels intentions. His observation hockey flares, and you see it. Blackbeard isn't pressing for the kill. He's dragging this out. Every time Shanks lands a clean blow, Teach eats it, laughs, and staggers back instead of countering. Why? Because while these two monsters trade blows, the real war is happening 10 ship lengths away. In the original timeline, Shanks walks into Marineford to end a war. But in this timeline, he's walked into Teach's stage play. Through observation, the battlefield unfolds in brutal detail. Lucky Roo's presence suddenly blinks, then flickers. Yasopp's focus fractures under a wave of darkness. The tight, disciplined red-haired formation we all know, it's being peeled apart, piece by piece, as Blackbeard's crew uses the chaos to slip between lines, sabotage cannons, and isolate commanders. Teach is taking hits on purpose, using his own body as a distraction just to buy them seconds. And then Teach says it out loud. He leans into a sword slash, lets it carve across his shoulder, and roars, "Shake the world for them, red hair! Let 'em see their safe Yonko bleed!" The Den Den Mushi he planted earlier, tucked on a broken mast, hidden in smoke, zooms in on Shanks' blood, live broadcast, whole world watching. This isn't a duel anymore, it's an execution of an era. Here's the kicker. Blackbeard doesn't just want to win, he wants to break the idea that there's a good emperor keeping the sea in check. He wants every rookie, every warlord, every marine to see Shanks fail in real time, the same way Marineford showed Ace fall. Shanks' mind starts racing. Duty to his crew. The promise he made to that kid in Fuchsia Village, the one who ran around yelling he'd become Pirate King. His quiet role as a stabilizer, the man even Sengoku trusted to end a war. All of that slams against one ugly truth. Teach is willing to sink everything, his own men, the island, the sea, if it means dragging Shanks down with him. And then the line finally snaps. A flash of darkness erupts near Beckman. Van Augur bends a bullet through warped space, and Shiryu appears where no one should be. A blade slides under Beckman's guard, coated in poison, invisible until it's too late. Beckman drops to one knee, blood and venom mixing, his rifle clattering across the deck. That's the critical break. Their brain, their anchor, just got hit by a dirty trick. Shanks' entire stance changes. Less forward drive, more wide arcs, more deflections. He's no longer trying to cut Teach down, he's trying to cage him, to keep this monster from reaching his wounded crew. Offense turns into containment. And now, the real dilemma hits, ladies and gentlemen. Does Shanks pull back, live with the shame of fleeing from Teach, and let the world think the red-haired pirates ran? Or does he stay, let the cameras roll, and become the perfect martyr? A dead Yonko whose fall gives Blackbeard the excuse to plunge the era into something even darker than Marineford ever was. But what if Shanks chooses a third path and breaks the script Teach wrote for him? The kill sequence. How Blackbeard actually manages to slay Shanks and breaks the script. Teach wrote for him. Shanks doesn't retreat. He rewrites the battlefield itself. But what if Blackbeard has already accounted for that and planned for a stage where Shanks' greatest strengths are turned into shackles? Let's dive into the kill sequence. Teach starts by attacking the one thing Shanks always protects first, his people. In the original timeline, Shanks appears at Marineford and instantly freezes everyone with sheer presence. In this timeline, Teach refuses a clean duel. He slams his palm into the ocean with the Gura Gura no Mi, sending vertical quakes tearing through sea and sky. The water between ships shears apart, masts snap, hulls tilt at insane angles. Suddenly, the Red Force and allied ships are splintered, drifting on broken plates of sea and shattered wood. You see the problem? Shanks can't just focus on Teach. Every tremor threatens to drown a crewmate. He's forced to keep splitting his attention, using haki to stabilize footing, leaping from fragment to fragment so no one falls behind. Here's the kicker. That chaos is the cover. As Shanks parries a quake shockwave to stop it from obliterating a nearby ship, Shiryu vanishes. Under invisibility, with COO masked by the screaming sea, he stalks along a cracking mast and appears at Shanks' blind spot for a single heartbeat, one perfect opening, on one blade. Steel bites into Shanks' side, deep and ugly, haki clashing but not fully blocking the sneak attack. Blood sprays across the broken deck. Everyone sees it. Ben shouts. Lucky Roo fires. Yasop's bullets scream past. But Shiryu is already gone, slipping back into nothing as the platform beneath them buckles. Shanks lands on one knee, wounded but furious, haki flaring like a storm. And that's exactly when Teach moves. Yami erupts under Shanks' feet, a whirlpool of darkness that drags at his body like a black hole. His movement's slow. His ability to reposition is crushed. He can still use haki, but he can't dance around the battlefield like before. Teach closes the distance, one hand radiating darkness, the other glowing with compressed Gura shockwaves. Blackbeard doesn't go for a flashy finisher right away. He batters Shanks, on quake after quake, each one focused like a rifle shot instead of a tsunami. Ribs crack. The earlier wound tears wider. Shanks still swings back, each clash splitting the air with conquerors. Then comes the final trade. Shanks bets everything on one charge, forcing his body through the gravity, sword coated in blinding haki. He carves across Teach's chest and face, deepening those scars, warping his jaw, making him howl in agony. But while Teach is screaming, he's laughing too, because his quake-wreathed fist is already buried in Shanks' torso, or a darkness spike has erupted straight through his chest from below. The world watches. A Den Mushi, stolen by underworld brokers but actually fed by Teach's crew, broadcasts the entire sequence. Marine surveillance snails are hijacked. Every major port and every Marineford reconstruction office, every shady bar sees Shanks coughing blood as his flag slips from a shattered mast and falls into the sea. Everyone hears the splash. Is that the moment the era breaks? Or the moment something even worse wakes up in Luffy, Ace, and the entire pirate world? Because this kill doesn't end the fight for the throne. It lights the fuse for what comes next. The last words of a Yonko, Shanks' final message, and the hat. And then, everything goes quiet. No crowd, no headlines, just the creak of dying wood and the hiss of waves licking at burning planks as Shanks kneels in the wreckage of his own ship. He's bleeding from Teach's quake-shattered ribs, one arm hanging useless, one hand pressed to the deck so he doesn't fall. The Red Force is in pieces, but Shanks is still conscious, still watching his crew. You see Ben Beckman skid to his side, gun discarded, hands shaking as he tries to steady his captain. Rue is yelling for a doctor who isn't there. Lucky Rue's face, usually grinning, is just blank terror. In the original timeline, Shanks strides into Marineford like an untouchable emperor. But in this timeline, you're watching that same Yonko cough blood onto splintered boards, while Blackbeard's shadow looms behind him. Shanks just laughs. It's ragged, wet, but it's a laugh. "Don't make those faces," he tells them. "We knew this era would be paid for in blood." He looks up at the sky, at the smoke, at the circling seagulls that will carry this news to every paper in the world. "I already bet my arm on the next generation. Did you really think it ended with me?" Here's the kicker. He brings up Luffy by name. "There's a boy out there," he says, vision blurring. "Wearing my hat. I gave it to him at Fuchsia and staked my life that he'd reach the top. This timeline doesn't stop because I fall here. The sea doesn't go quiet just because one pirate sinks." His fingers fumble at his head, at the place the straw hat should be. It's not there, but the gesture is automatic, like he can still feel the weight of Roger's will resting on his hair. Pattern interrupt. Shanks isn't clinging to life. He's clinging to the story. "Make sure he hears about this," he orders, voice suddenly sharp. "Not as a tragedy, as a challenge. Tell Luffy, I kept the promise as far as I could. The rest is his." Ben's eyes harden. You can almost see the exact second rage gives way to resolve. "We'll kill him now," one of the weaker crew screams, reaching for a sword. Until Beckman shuts it down instantly, gun back in hand, hockey flaring. "No, we live. We carry the captain's will. Suicidal revenge is Teach's game, not ours." The red-haired pirates bite down their grief, teeth grinding, fists white, but they move with terrifying discipline, forming a shield around Shanks as the ship tilts and the ocean claws higher. Shanks exhales. "Good. That's why I chose you." His eyes close with that same easy smile Luffy remembers from Fuchsia Village. A wave crashes. Shanks' body slips off the broken deck, red hair fanning in the water like a dying flag, then vanishing beneath the dark. Or in some versions of this tale, he lies on a single floating plank, one empty sleeve, one still hand, staring at a sky he can't see anymore. Above it all, Blackbeard laughs. "This is it. Ladies and gentlemen," he roars to no one and everyone. "The real era starts now!" But what if that laugh is exactly what wakes something even more dangerous in Luffy? Teach's victory roar. Blackbeard declares a new era. That laugh doesn't stop. It grows. Teach throws his head back over Shanks' broken silhouette and just roars, the sound rolling across the sea like a cannon barrage. Then, instantly, he snaps into performance mode. Because you see, Blackbeard isn't just a monster, he's a showman. He yanks out a Den Mushi, jams it on a crate, and lets the snail's eyes lock onto the carnage. "Oi, world!" he bellows, voice shaking the transponder. In the original timeline, you thought the Yonko kept you safe, right? Shanks, the peacekeeper. But in this timeline, that illusion ends today. Across the Grand Line, mud receivers crackle. Marines in gloomy offices, underworld brokers in smoky bars, small-time pirates huddled in dingy cabins. Everyone hears it. Teach's laughter, Shanks' silent corpse, and that one sentence that flips the entire era on its head. The age of safe emperors is over. From now on, only true darkness rules the seas. But what if we zoom in on how he spins this? He doesn't call it an ambush, he calls it a correction. Teach frames Shanks' death as proof that the old guard can't keep up with the new generation of monsters Roger's execution unleashed. He shouts that Roger lit the fuse at Logtown, Whitebeard shook the world at Marineford, And now Blackbeard is the natural evolution of that great pirate era. In his words, Shanks wasn't betrayed, he was outgrown. And here's the kicker. He turns the battlefield into a stage and a contract signing at the same time. While the Den Den Mushi keeps broadcasting, Blackbeard walks to the shattered mast where the red-haired flag once flew. He tears it down, lets it fall over Shanks' blood, and plants his own Jolly Roger in the same spot, the skull and crossbones grinning over 3 jagged scars. He doesn't stop there. Teach declares every island under Shanks' protection to now be Blackbeard territory. He calls out names. Elbaf, former Whitebeard spheres Shanks had been quietly guarding. Even neutral ports the red-haired crew kept stable. "You fly my flag or you burn," he says, and you can hear allied captains all over the New World freezing. Then he twists the knife further. He offers mercy. Any surviving red-haired officers, allied captains, even informants, join him and live under his shadow, or be hunted as traitors to the new era. Imagine Ben Beckman hearing that while bleeding out, realizing Teach is trying to poach Shanks' legacy in real time. The world's reaction is split down the middle. Some pirates are terrified. Others are hyped out of their minds. Weak crews vanish into the Calm Belt, destroy their Vivor cards, and go dark, because who stops a Teach with no Shanks to check him? But the real sharks, the ones who watched Marineford and learned, suddenly see nothing but opportunity. If one Yonko can fall, why not 2? Why not the world government next? And hanging over all of this is one brutal question. With Shanks gone, who's actually left that can stop Blackbeard before he reaches Laugh-Tale? Kaido's gone in most of these branches. Big Mom's scattered. Or if the Marines are in chaos, does that burden fall entirely on Luffy now? Or does this kill force Luffy's path to twist into something darker than Roger ever imagined? Let's dive into how that pressure reshapes Luffy's journey, and what happens when Inherited will meet weaponized despair. Shockwaves across the seas, Marines, Gorosei, and the Holy Knights. React Luffy's path is twisting into something darker. And while the seas are still processing Shanks' death, the first real earthquake doesn't hit the pirates. It hits the government. Picture Marine HQ, New Marineford, morning reports, routine. Then a Den Den Mushi crackles to life, hijacking every transponder line with Blackbeard's laugh. Not a Marine dispatch. Not Cypher Paul. The confirmation of a Yonko's death comes straight from the killer himself. It broadcast like a victory concert. The room goes silent. Even the rookie officers who never saw Marineford feel it. A pillar of the era just fell. In the original timeline, the Marines only learned about major shifts through intel networks and carefully verified reports. But in this timeline, Teach weaponizes the news itself. Sengoku, sitting in quiet retirement with that cap pulled down, hears the words, "Red-haired Shanks is dead." And you can instantly imagine the vein popping on his forehead. Shanks was chaos, yes, but controlled chaos. A man who could walk into Marineford and end a war with a sentence. A known quantity who kept worse monsters at bay. Garp? You see him at the edge of town, newspaper shaking in his fist. He remembers the kid who bet everything on a rubber-brained boy from Fuchsia. He remembers that Marineford platform. It's when Shanks stepped in and saved what was left of Ace's era and Luffy's future. And now the man who once stopped Kaido from crashing that war is gone. The board doesn't just change, it explodes. Let's dive into Mary Jawaise, where the real panic is hidden behind calm voices. The Gorosei listen to Blackbeard's broadcast with those unreadable expressions. But make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. One stabilizing Yonko, erased. One walking disaster, roaring to the world that he did it. To them, it's a paradox, a threat, and an opportunity in the same breath. Shanks was the pirate they could secretly negotiate with. The emperor who accidentally kept Luffy, Kaido, and Blackbeard from clashing too soon. Here's the kicker. With Shanks gone, Teach is overextending in the most public way possible. He's announcing he's strong enough to kill a legend. He's inviting every shark in the sea to test him. So what if the world government stops treating him as a distant endgame and starts treating him as a loaded gun they can aim? Orders go out in whispers. The Holy Knights, the God's Knights, those shadowy elites we've only heard rumors about in this story, are told to accelerate every contingency plan. One branch? Track Blackbeard's movements, map his territories, and prepare a surgical erasure once he's drained enough rivals. Another branch? Let him run wild just long enough to smash Luffy, the revolutionaries, and any rogue Marines who defected after Marineford. Because in this timeline, Sakazuki's hardline justice and Imu's silent will align on one brutal conclusion. They can no longer afford to wait for pirates to thin each other out. The Seraphim, the Holy Knights, the Gorosei themselves stepping onto the field, everything gets pulled forward. So when Luffy, Blackbeard, and every surviving monster of the sea race toward Laugh Tale, they won't just be colliding with each other. They'll be slamming headfirst into a final plan the world government has been hiding for 800 years. What happens when the last great pirate war starts on the government's schedule instead of the pirates? That's where this timeline gets truly terrifying. The red-haired remnant. What happens to Shanks' crew? And right in the middle of that terrifying setup, one flag suddenly goes dark. The Red Force doesn't sink in some epic, drawn-out war. It limps away. Torn sails, shattered masts, half the figurehead missing. You see Ben Beckman on the deck, smoking in silence, blood running down his arm as he orders the retreat. In the original timeline, Shanks walks away from Marineford untouched, the calm emperor who ends the war. But in this timeline, he's gone, and his crew has to decide in a single heartbeat: die chasing revenge, or live carrying his will. They know what Shanks would say. That's the problem. He's the man who stopped Kaido from crashing Marineford, who chose balance over ego, who gambled everything on Luffy instead of his own glory. So when Blackbeard turns away, laughing with 2 devil fruits and a new legend, Ben's brain is already racing. If they charge Teach now, they all die. If they die, the story Shanks bet on dies with them. And so Ben does the thing no one expects from a Yonko crew. He runs, not out of fear, but out of calculation. He orders the red-haired pirates to scatter, to cut their Vivre cards, to vanish into the cracks of the new world. Their ships peel off in different directions, some toward Elbaf, some toward the underworld routes, some straight into the Calm Belt. They're not chasing glory anymore, they're controlling information. Who learns that Shanks is dead? When does that news hit Marineford's ruins? The Gorosei? Luffy? Here's the kicker. This turns the red-haired pirates into the new Whitebeard remnants, but without the prideful, open warfare. Instead of Marco's battered armadas, you get surgical ghosts. Lucky Roo and Lime Juice hijacking Cypher Paul convoys, Hongo trading intel with revolutionaries. A Rockstar ferrying coded messages between islands that still fly the red-haired flag in secret. And then there's Yasop. In the original timeline, he delays seeing Usopp because he's a deadbeat pirate dad with a dream. But what if that changes instantly? In this timeline, he watched the captain who believed in Luffy die to the man destined to be Luffy's final enemy. He pulled the trigger. He missed. Now every time he looks at his rifle, he sees Usopp's face and Shanks' blood. Does he really wait for Dressrosa or Wano now? Or does he hunt the Straw Hats down the moment he learns where they are, desperate to warn Luffy, terrified to look his own son in the eyes and say, "I couldn't protect the man who protected you"? Ben leans into that. He weaponizes guilt into purpose. The remnants become a shadow escort for Luffy's journey, nudging events from just off-screen. A mysterious sniper support shot here. A Yonko crew that mysteriously backs off there. A rumor that keeps Blackbeard and the world government just a few steps out of sync with Luffy's path. Because that's their new mission. Carry Shanks' final words, his intel on Blackbeard, and his faith in the next generation straight to the Straw Hat Captain without letting Teach know they're still alive. But what happens when Blackbeard finally realizes the red-haired ghosts never left the board, and that they've been feeding Luffy the one thing Teach can't steal: time? The news reaches the Sunny, Luffy's second world-shattering loss. And that's where we jump to the Thousand Sunny, because while Shanks' crew is moving like ghosts in the shadows, and the rest of the world only sees one thing: a headline that detonates across the seas. The paper birds swoop in, transponder snails start screaming, and on the Sunny, somewhere in the New World, Nami snatches a fresh newspaper out of the air, flips it open, and her face drains of color. You see Shanks' wanted poster photo blown up across the front page. That easy grin, the familiar scar. Except now it's framed by one brutal line: Emperor Red-Haired Shanks, killed by Blackbeard. Under it, grainy shots of a shattered island, a split sky, and Teach's silhouette looming over a fallen figure with a familiar coat. Nami doesn't even speak at first. She just walks it over. Luffy's laughing about food, about the next island, about how he's going to see Shanks soon and finally return the hat. In the original timeline, the paper that broke him at Marineford showed Ace on the execution platform. In this timeline, it's the man who started his entire journey. Luffy reads the headline once, blinks, reads it again. Shanks? That same disbelief from Marineford hits, but it's heavier now, because this isn't a helpless rookie staring at a broadcast. This is a Yonko, a man with Conqueror's haki that shakes islands. His hands start to tremble, crumpling the page. The crew feels it instantly. Zoro's eyes narrow, jaw clenching so hard you can almost hear it. That's not just another Emperor dying. That's the guy Luffy has talked about since East Blue. Zoro doesn't cry. He just radiates this cold, surgical fury, already thinking, if Captain moves, we all move. No hesitation. Usopp? This hits different. That's his dad's captain, the man who took Yasopp to sea. Or is the man who laughed in that East Blue bar while Luffy bragged about becoming a great pirate. Usopp's legs go weak, tears welling before he can stop them, because suddenly his father's world and his own are bleeding together in the worst way possible. Jinbe reads past the headline. He's already scanning the fine print, the bounties, the marine statements. He understands what this means politically. Blackbeard just removed the most balanced Yonko, the one emperor who actually walked into Marineford to stop a war. Here's the kicker. With Shanks gone, the board is wide open for Teach to become the uncontested Dark Emperor. Nami's not thinking about politics. She's watching Luffy's face. The way his grin dies. The way his pupils shrink like they did when Ace was punched through the chest. She remembers the broken boy on Amazon Lily, or screaming that he couldn't save his brother, and she's terrified this will shatter him again. But what if it doesn't break him the same way? Luffy's knees hit the deck, just like at Marineford. For a second, he's that kid again, clutching his head, memories slamming into him. Shanks betting his arm on Luffy's future, placing the straw hat on his head, promising they'd meet again at the top. That dream, reuniting, returning the hat, clashing as equals, just got stolen. Only this time, there's something else under the grief. Rage. The ship creaks as his haki leaks out, making weaker crew members stagger. Plates crack, wood splinters. In the original timeline, after Ace's death, Luffy collapsed and needed Rayleigh, Jinbe, and 2 years of training to stand up again. But in this timeline, he's already an emperor. There's no safe time out. A no training arc escape hatch. He stands. Everyone's calling his name. Robin's warning that this is exactly what Blackbeard wants. Jinbei's saying they need intel. Nami's begging him not to run off alone. Usopp's voice is shaking, but he's still trying to reach his captain. Luffy isn't listening. His dream didn't die with Shanks. It mutated. The promise of returning the hat is gone, replaced by a new, uglier vow. He will find the man who stole that future. He will crush Blackbeard with his own hands. He grips the straw hat like a lifeline, eyes shadowed. "We're going," he says, voice low and deadly in a way that makes even Zoro flinch. "I'm not waiting. I'm hunting Teach down now." And that's the dangerous shift. Instead of a broken boy needing time to heal, you now have a grieving Yonko aiming all that pain straight at Blackbeard with 0 breaks. So what happens when Luffy charges into the new world like that, ladies and gentlemen, and Teach is already preparing for him? Will Luffy break or harden? Comparing post-Ace and post-Shanks, Luffy Teach is setting the board. Luffy is charging in, and between those two forces, Shanks' death becomes the crack that can either shatter Luffy or temper him into something even scarier. To see how wild this gets, you have to rewind to Luffy after Marineford. In the original timeline, losing Ace doesn't make him stronger at first. It breaks him. He's screaming on the submarine, begging Law and Jinbe to let him go back. On Amazon Lily, he's not thinking about the Pirate King dream. He's thinking, I couldn't save my brother. That's full collapse. Total powerlessness. He punches trees, he cries, he runs from the pain until Jinbe forces him to remember he still has his crew. And then comes the pivot. Rayleigh shows up, Luffy burns the X on his arm, and suddenly the story slows down. 2 whole years, no Straw Hats, no crazy new world chaos on screen, just training, healing, and preparing so that kind of loss never happens again. But what if you try that play again? When Luffy is already a Yonko. In this timeline, post-Wano Luffy isn't a rookie. He's Gear 5, Drumbeat God mode. He has Conqueror's coding, future sight, a fleet, and a crew that can hang with emperors. He's a pillar of the era. He can't vanish to some quiet island for another time, skip without the world instantly tilting into Blackbeard's favor. If he disappears now, the balance doesn't wobble, it collapses. So emotionally, he's trapped between 2 paths. On one side, Luffy stays Luffy. He still laughs, still stretches his arms toward the sky, still believes in freedom and adventure. But there's a sharper edge under the smile. Think of how he looked facing Kaido after seeing Okabore Town burned. That same fury, but pointed at Teach every waking second. He doesn't become cold, he just stops giving second chances to anyone flying the Blackbeard flag. On the other side, you get something more dangerous. A Luffy who temporarily channels Roger and Garp at their most intense. No goofy distractions, no wandering off for meat in the middle of a crisis. Just a relentless hunter who will tear down islands if Blackbeard is hiding there. Here's the kicker. Gear 5 already lets him warp reality. Pair that with a singular and vengeful focus, and you suddenly have a joy boy who feels a lot less like a prankster god and a lot more like a storm. Shanks' death also forces a mental upgrade. Luffy can't pretend he's just some pirate anymore. He's a symbol. You see, once Teach kills the man who bet everything on Luffy's future, it becomes obvious that believing in Luffy is dangerous. His allies, his mentors, his brothers, those are now prime targets. That realization accelerates his maturity way faster than the Ace Loss did, because this time, the enemy is actively hunting his legacy. So the real question becomes, does that iconic Luffy smile survive? Or does his idea of freedom evolve into something heavier, where being Pirate King means carrying the weight of every person who dies for that dream? Ladies and gentlemen, if his grin cracks even a little, the entire era feels it. And when an era starts to bend like that, the next move Teach makes could decide whether it breaks completely. Inherited will rewritten, from Roger to Shanks to Luffy versus Roger to Teach to Luffy. And that's exactly where Teach tries to strike. Not just at Shanks' body, but at the meaning of the great pirate era itself. In the original timeline, Shanks is Roger's quiet echo. He inherits the Oro Jackson's aura, that easy grin, that belief that piracy is about freedom, not fear. He sails with the man who laughs at the end of the world, then spends decades guarding that laugh. He carries Roger's ideals, then literally hangs them on Luffy's head in the form of that straw hat. One hat, one promise. One kid he believes will surpass them all. But what if, in this timeline, Blackbeard kills that echo and tries to rewrite the will behind it? You see, Shanks doesn't just pass Roger's hat to Luffy, he passes Roger's restraint. The choice not to plunge the world into chaos before its time, the decision to stop Marineford, to stop Kaido, to stop pointless bloodshed. When he sacrifices his arm, when he walks into Marineford and ends a war with words, he's telling the world Roger's era wasn't about domination. It was about who would be free enough to laugh last. Teach looks at the same era and sees something completely different. He's also a relic of that age, but from Whitebeard's ship instead of Roger's. Another apprentice under a living legend, another man chasing the One Piece. Except where Shanks internalized Roger's heart, Blackbeard internalized the part of the old era that never healed. The hunger? It's the cruelty? The belief that if you just take enough, the world has to acknowledge you. Here's the kicker. In this timeline, once Shanks falls, Teach doesn't just brag about beating a Yonko, he launches a full-on propaganda war. He tells the world Roger's smile was always a predator's grin, that the great pirate era was never about dreams, only about the strong taking what they want. He calls Shanks' peacekeeping a betrayal, says the red-haired coward tried to put a leash on piracy, tried to hide Laugh-Tale's truth, tried to delay the real age of freedom. So now Luffy is standing between two ghosts of Roger. On one side, Shanks' legacy, a man who believed in a free, joyful era, so much he was willing to wait, to lose an arm, to die, if it meant the right person reached the end. On the other, a Teach's twisted inheritance, a claim that the Pirate King is just the final tyrant, the one who proves that willpower equals who you crush, and Luffy is suddenly the battlefield where those stories collide. Does he honor Shanks by doubling down on that simple, stupid, beautiful dream of an era where everyone can laugh? Or does the rage of watching Blackbeard hijack Roger's name tempt him toward a harsher freedom, where being Pirate King means breaking anyone who stands in the way? Ladies and gentlemen, in this timeline, the race to Laugh-Tale is no longer just a treasure hunt. It's a war over narrative. The final question isn't only who reaches the last island, it's whose version of Roger's will survives, Shanks or Blackbeard's. And the next moves both of them make will decide which story the world believes. Yonko balance broken. Who fills the Red Emperor's void? And when one of those storytellers is erased, the whole script of the sea glitches. Shanks doesn't just die. The title of Red-Haired Emperor dies with him. Instantly, the board looks wrong. We've got Blackbeard, now the man who slew Whitebeard and Shanks. We've got Luffy, the rising sun god who toppled Kaido and Big Mom. We've got Buggy and Crossguild, the joke that the world is suddenly taking way too seriously. And then, a vacant throne, a bleeding fourth slot that every shark in the New World can smell. In the original timeline, the Yonko balance is this weird, tense stalemate. 4 monsters, 4 territories, 4 ideologies. But what if that label itself starts to crack? In this timeline, the world government looks at Shanks' death and goes, why are we still legitimizing pirates with fancy titles? You see, they don't need to play referee anymore. They've got the SSG, Seraphim, and the Holy Knights. Instead of announcing a new Yonko, they can just let chaos bloom and send in gods and cyborg children to surgically erase whoever gets too close to Laugh-Tale. So who actually moves on Shanks' old waters? That's where it gets wild. Kid, if he survived his clash with Shanks in this timeline, suddenly has the perfect revenge arc. The man who humiliated him is gone, and his lieutenants are scrambling. Do the Kid pirates swoop in and plant their flag, or does Kid double down on hunting Blackbeard himself? Law's Heart pirates, with their surgical hit-and-run style, could become the new shadow rulers of former red hair routes, untaxing traffic and playing information brokers while everyone else is busy mourning. And don't sleep on Shanks' own allies. Former red-haired sub-commanders, allied captains, even giants from Elbaf who respected him could rise as regional lords, carving his empire into feudal pieces. No one can be Shanks, but a network of little Shanks trying to keep his code alive? That's a whole new flavor of New World politics. Here's the kicker. While the monsters clash, Buggy's stock goes to the moon. With Shanks gone, a ton of mid-tier and even high-tier pirates want a banner that isn't Blackbeard's darkness or Luffy's unpredictable freedom. Cross-Guild pays you to hunt Marines, has Mihawk and Crocodile on the poster, and now, in the vacuum of a fallen emperor, it feels like a safe third option. But how many desperate crews start calling Buggy the new red hair just because they need a symbol and a paycheck? So the real question becomes, what defines this era now? Kaido's war-loving legacy, where strength alone decides everything? Blackbeard's opportunistic nightmare, where every death is just another step on his ladder? Or can Luffy, carrying Ace, Whitebeard, and now Shanks' will, impose a third path before the last empty throne is claimed by darkness? Because the next move Teach makes with that stolen legacy is where this timeline stops being a power struggle and becomes an apocalypse. Marineford reversed, if Blackbeard kills Shanks instead of Ace dying. Marineford was the moment the world held its breath, a war that changed everything. In the original timeline, it was Ace on that platform, and Whitebeard making his final stand, and Shanks walking in at the end as the man who slammed the brakes on history. He stopped Akainu. He stopped Blackbeard. He stopped the bloodshed with nothing but presence and promise. You see, Marineford's emotional core is simple. A brother executed in front of Luffy, a father dying to protect his sons, and a red-haired emperor stepping in as the last adult in the room, saying, "This war is over." But what if Marineford was actually the rehearsal? And the real tragedy comes later? In this timeline, Shanks doesn't end the chaos. He becomes the spark. Instead of being the peacemaker who freezes the battlefield, he's the fallen king whose death ignites a war that makes Marineford look like a warm-up. Here's the kicker. Marineford was a rescue mission. Luffy was a rookie, crashing into a Yonko-level slaughterhouse just to save Ace. He was out of his depth, getting folded by admirals, barely hanging on with sheer willpower. In this new timeline, when Blackbeard kills Shanks, Luffy isn't the kid anymore. He's a Yonko, the man Shanks bet his arm on, the one carrying Nika, Gear 5, and a reputation that terrifies the world government. So now flip the roles. Once, Luffy was the desperate brother. Now he's the future pirate king watching his mentor, his original hero, get taken out by his destined final enemy. At Marineford, he was the victim of the era. After Shanks' death, he becomes the looming avenger of the era. Do you see how that instantly changes his energy? It's not just about saving one person, it's about answering a direct challenge to his dream. And Blackbeard? In the original timeline, at Marineford is his coming out party. He steals the Gura Gura no Mi, laughs in Sengoku's face, and declares a new era while everyone is still processing Whitebeard's corpse. That was already insane. But in this timeline, he stacks Shanks' death on top of that legacy. This is Marineford 2.0, ladies and gentlemen, except this time, there's no Shanks walking in to say, "Stop." Shanks is the headline casualty. Pattern interrupt for you. Remember how Marineford, for all its tragedy, still felt like part of the adventure? The crew split, the escape, the training, the promise to meet again. That tone is gone now. Shanks' murder by Blackbeard is the moment the story's genre shifts. Adventure gives way to endgame. Every laugh on the Sunny now has a shadow behind it. Every clash with Blackbeard carries Ace, Whitebeard, and Shanks on Luffy's fists. So when the world hears that the man who once ended a war has been ended instead, the question isn't what happens next. It's who dares stand still when the real final saga just started. Lore threads tighten, Joy Boy, the Void Century, and Shanks' secret moves. And the craziest part is, Shanks' death doesn't feel random. It feels scripted by history. Like the Void Century just reached out and claimed another piece on the board. You see, in the original timeline, we get that insane off-screen meeting, Shanks sitting with the Gorosei, calmly talking about a certain pirate. That scene is terrifying. Why does a Yonko stroll into the holy room of the world and they listen? But what if that talk was all about preventing the exact nightmare we're in now? Luffy, Blackbeard, and the ancient weapons colliding before the world is ready. Now let's dive into what that means in this timeline. Shanks has seen Blackbeard up close. Those scars on his face? Teach gave him those even before the Yami Yami no Mi. At Marineford, Shanks literally tells Blackbeard, "Not yet." That's not fear. That's scheduling. He was delaying a clash that could wake up Pluton, Uranus, and every sleeping weapon tied to the Void Century if Joy Boy and the Darkness Fruit user go all out too early. Because now we know what the story's been hinting at. Luffy isn't just Luffy, he's Nika, he's Joy Boy. And suddenly, Shanks' entire vibe with him looks different. This isn't just a friendly Uncle Pirate, this is a guardian. He gives Luffy the hat. He stakes his arm on that future. He watches from a distance while Luffy grows, only stepping in at Marineford when that future is about to be snuffed out. In this timeline, that protection plan gets shattered. Blackbeard killing Shanks doesn't just hurt emotionally, it snaps the leash off the endgame. The timetable the Gorosei and Imu were trying to control, it accelerates instantly. Joy Boy is awake. The darkness that can swallow any power is on the move. And the one Yonko who could walk into Mariajoie as a negotiator is gone. Here's the kicker. Whitebeard already warned them. Someday, a man will appear who will challenge the world. In the original timeline, that was a slow-burning prophecy. Luffy grows, the world government reacts, the final war builds. But what if Shanks' death violently throws that mantle onto Luffy's shoulders overnight? No buffer, no mentor, just grief, rage, and the drums of liberation getting louder while Blackbeard laughs in the shadows. Now think about Laugh Tale and the Void Century. Shanks sailed with Roger. He knows what the One Piece really is, what Joy Boy failed to do, and how the ancient weapons tie into that great cleansing Imu is planning. And if he dies without passing that intel on, then the two people racing toward the final island are Luffy and Blackbeard, with no mediator, no historian, no breaks. So the question hanging over the seas now isn't just who becomes Pirate King. It's this. When Luffy and Teach reach those buried secrets blind, do they free the world or tear it apart the way the last Joy Boy did? Blackbeard's endgame accelerates, road poneglyphs and Laugh Tale. And that's where things get terrifying fast, because once Shanks is gone, the race to Laugh Tale doesn't just speed up, it breaks the speed limit. In the original timeline, Shanks is this weird, invisible wall in the new world. He's not hoarding treasure on screen, but he's clearly sitting on information, alliances, and territories tied to the road poneglyphs. You see, a guy who can walk into Mariajoie, stop Marineford, and talk to Gorosei is not clueless about the final island. But what if, in this timeline, Blackbeard rips that wall down with his bare hands? Suddenly, every island that just happened to fly the red-haired flag becomes open season. Former allies, neutral ports, secret safe houses for scholars or stone guardians. Teach doesn't even need to know exactly where the road poneglyphs are yet. He just needs to know who Shanks trusted, and he hunts them one by one. Here's the kicker. Shanks didn't need to personally possess every road poneglyph rubbing to matter. He only had to know which Yonko and which hidden clans guarded which stones. In this timeline, when news spreads that the man with red hair who stared down Kaido and Whitebeard is dead, killed by Teach, everyone who used to shrug Blackbeard off as a rookie with 2 fruits instantly panics. Teach weaponizes that fear. He shows up at ex-Shanks territories with that Yonko killer reputation dripping off him. Do you resist the man who killed the red-haired emperor, or do you hand over your copies? Whole tribes that once dealt only with Shanks suddenly fold. Archaeologists are dragged out of hiding. Guardians who swore oaths to the red-haired pirates are forced to redraw those oaths in blood. So now you've got Blackbeard with his own intel, plus whatever Shanks had, plus whatever Shanks' allies are coerced into surrendering. How long before that adds up to full road poneglyph coverage? How long before he has a route to Laugh Tale that actually beats Luffy there? In the original timeline, it feels like Luffy is destined to arrive just in time. But in this timeline, the Straw Hats feel the ground shaking under them and have to accelerate everything. They can't chill in Zoo. They can't stall in Wano. Robin's translations stop being a long-term project and turn into a ticking clock. Because what happens if Teach reaches the One Piece first? Does he even care about the truth of the Void Century? Or does he just want the power, the title, and the keys to ancient weapons so he can hold the entire world hostage? And ladies and gentlemen, that's the real nightmare. Blackbeard standing on Laugh Tale, Shanks' blood still on his hands. I laughing as the drums of liberation are drowned out by the sound of the Darkest Emperor claiming Roger's treasure before Luffy even sees the final shore. Straw Hat strategy shift from adventure route to assassination route. And that's the point where the Straw Hat journey itself has to mutate. Because if Blackbeard can stand where Roger stood, while Shanks' blood is still fresh, then sailing like it's just an adventure, that's suicide. On the Sunny, the debate hits like a storm. Do they keep following the loose, fun, visit every crazy island route? Or do they divert everything to hunt Blackbeard down before he becomes an untouchable, three-fruit, ancient weapon-backed monster? You see, in the original timeline, the new world is chaotic, but Luffy can afford to wander. Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoo, Whole Cake, Wano. Us in this timeline, every detour feels like giving Teach a head start. Zoro is the first to snap. He's not talking about sightseeing, he's talking about war. To him, Shanks was the man the captain respected. Letting his killer roam free is a stain on Luffy's name. Jinbei backs him instantly, but with that cold, tactical edge. He's seen what happens when you let a tyrant consolidate power under the sea. He lays it out, intercept Teach's routes, hit his supply lines, force decisive clashes before Blackbeard finishes absorbing Shanks' territories and Poneglyph intel. But what if charging straight at Teach is exactly what he wants? That's where Nami and Robin slam the brakes. Nami's already watching the log poses, the currents, the Yonko territories, and she's seeing trap after trap. In her mind, a Blackbeard is a walking storm belt, unpredictable, layered, baiting rivals into overextending. Robin takes it further. She reminds everyone that Teach is hunting information too. Road poneglyphs, ancient weapons, the Void Century. Walking into his territory without knowing how far he's gotten is handing him their lives. So what does Luffy do when his dream and his rage collide? He doesn't drop Laugh Tale, he weaponizes it. Suddenly, it's not just, I'll be king of the pirates someday. It's a race. First to Laugh Tale wins the era, and built into that race is a promise. On the way to the One Piece, he will find Blackbeard and break him for Shanks. The Straw Hat journey stops being a wandering adventure and becomes a time attack against the darkest rival we've ever seen. And here's the kicker. That new objective forces them into alliances they never would have touched this early. To outpace Teach, they need reach, intel, and chaos. That means talking to Cross Guild, where Buggy's clown facade hides Mihawk's blade and Crocodile's ambition. That means syncing with the Revolutionary Army, because Dragon's network can track Blackbeard cells the Marines won't even acknowledge. And it means hunting down the scattered red-haired remnants, Ben Beckman, Yasopp, Lucky Roo, to forge an anti-Teach coalition built on grief and vengeance. So the Sunny's log pose tilts, not just toward Laugh Tale, but toward the shadow of Blackbeard's flag. The Straw Hats lock in a new course, ladies and gentlemen. Every island, every alliance, every fight now doubles as a step toward the inevitable. A world-shaking collision with the man who killed Shanks. And as the next island rises on the horizon, the question isn't what adventure waits there. It's this: is Blackbeard already waiting too? Usopp and Yasopp, a father-son confrontation over failure. And while the Sunny cuts through the waves toward that answer, we zoom out to one of the most long-awaited reunions in the entire story, and twist the knife. Because in this timeline, Usopp finally comes face-to-face with Yasopp not at a party, not at a victory feast, but in the shadow of Shanks' grave. In the original timeline, that father-son meeting is teased as this goofy, emotional payoff we all cheer for. In this timeline, everyone in the Red Hair camp is dead quiet. The air is heavy. You see Red Force anchored beside the Sunny at some hidden cove. The Jolly Roger flying at half-mast. Yasopp steps off the gangplank, and for the first time, the man who abandoned Syrup Village to chase adventure is the one who can't look his son in the eye. Because here's the kicker. This isn't just I left you and your mom. This is I failed to protect the man who believed in your captain. Yasopp, the sharpshooter who never misses, missed the one shot that mattered. He replays it every night. Teach's darkness swallowing the battlefield, the shockwave of the Gura Gura, Shanks staggering, and he wasn't fast enough. Not to kill Blackbeard, not even to cover his captain. So what happens when that guilt meets Usopp's grief? Yasopp's first words aren't proud, they're broken. He's terrified Usopp will hate him. That every lie Usopp told as a kid about his brave warrior of the sea, Dad, will shatter on the spot. That the Straw Hat's sniper will look at him and see the coward who let Luffy's hero die. But what if this is exactly where Usopp's character flips? We've seen him run at Eni's lobby, stand back up at Dressrosa, stare God Usopp-level fear in the face. Now he's got three storms inside him at once: rage at Blackbeard, grief for Shanks, and this raw, unexpected empathy for the man who just lost his own guiding star. Pattern interrupt here. Instead of screaming, Usopp steps forward and hugs him. He's shaking. He's crying. But he says the one thing Yasopp can't forgive himself enough to believe. Shanks chose that fight, Luffy chose that path. Our job now isn't to drown in it. In that moment, that Usopp isn't the scared kid behind Luffy anymore. He's the bridge between two generations of snipers, two crews, two eras. Let's dive into the growth this unlocks. Usopp doesn't just comfort Yasopp, he makes a vow. If Blackbeard's darkness can erase devil fruits, then their answer is accuracy, preparation, and haki. Usopp demands training, real sniper training. Observation haki drilled until he can see through the void, trick shots that can tag a Yonko through chaos. He declares he'll become the kind of warrior who can stand on the front lines of the coming war, not just hide behind giants. And Usopp, instead of running from his failure, he channels it. Father and son sit under that half-mast flag and aim their regret at one target, supporting Luffy. Every shot they take from now on, every plan they help Beckman draw up, now is about clearing a path for the Straw Hat Captain to reach Blackbeard and end this era of fear. So as the two ships part ways, you don't just have a repaired family. You have a sniper alliance, ladies and gentlemen, forged in the wake of Shanks' death, aiming straight at the monster who started it all. But how does the rest of the Red Hair crew handle a world without their captain? And what does that mean when they finally cross paths with the Straw Hats on the same battlefield as Teach? Garp's second failure, Ace, Shanks, and the weight of inaction. And while the Red Hair pirates are trying to stand back up without their captain, there's one old Marine who can't stand up at all. Because the news that Blackbeard killed Shanks doesn't just shake the New World, it drags Monkey D. Garp straight back to that execution platform at Marineford. You see, in the original timeline, Garp froze at the one moment he swore he wouldn't. Luffy is sprinting up the steps, Ace's chains are clinking, and Garp stands between duty and blood. He talks big about justice, about being a hero of the Marines. But when Akainu's fist goes through Ace's chest, Garp doesn't move. Sengoku holds him down. But the truth is, his own conviction pins him harder than any Buddha palm. That paralysis becomes his scar. Now fast forward in this timeline. The paper hits his desk. Red-haired Shanks, killed by Marshal D. Teach. Instantly, that old wound rips open, because Shanks isn't just some Yonko to Garp. He's Roger's cabin boy, the red-haired brat who used to run around Oro Jackson while Garp chased the Pirate King. But the man who walked into Fuchsia Village, met his grandson, and literally bet his arm on Luffy's future. So when Garp reads that headline, it's not just a fallen emperor. It's the kid who inherited Roger's will. The man who protected Luffy before Garp ever could. Murdered by the same darkness that stole Ace's life. And Whitebeard's era. How does a man like Garp process that? Rage. Guilt. And most terrifying of all, fear. Rage at Teach, obviously. This is the pirate who defected from Whitebeard, who weaponized Marineford, who walked out of that war laughing. But what if Garp also sees his own fingerprints on this mess? If he had broken ranks at Marineford, if he had crushed Akainu, if he had ended Blackbeard right there instead of watching the era balance itself, does Shanks ever die like this? Let's dive into that guilt. Garp has always played this dangerous middle game, protecting Luffy and Ace while propping up the same institution that condemned them. He let Ace be raised as a pirate. He let Luffy sail. He trusted that the new era would sort itself out without him shattering the system. Now Shanks' death is proof that inaction is also a choice, and it costs blood. Here's the kicker. This might be the moment Garp snaps in this timeline. Does he march into Marine HQ and demand a full-scale hunt for Blackbeard, even if the Gorosei refuse? Does he abandon rank entirely, pulling a hero of the Marines goes rogue move to hunt Teach himself, even if it means dying at Hachinosu? And through all of this, one question haunts him. What will this do to Luffy? Because Garp knows what losing Ace did to his grandson. Now imagine Luffy losing his childhood hero, who's his future rival, the man behind the Straw Hat, to the same monster he's destined to face at the end. Does that forge the Pirate King or break the boy Garp raised? So we're left with a brutal generational question. How many more times can the old guard, Garp, Sengoku, even Rayleigh, watch this new era bleed before they finally break their chains and intervene? And if Garp does move at last, are we looking at the spark of a Marine Civil War or the last stand of a dying age? Sengoku, Akainu, and the justice dilemma after Shanks' death. So while Garp's heart is tearing itself apart, the real storm is brewing at the very top of the Marines. Because when Shanks falls to Blackbeard, it doesn't just shatter Luffy's dream, it shatters the balance Sengoku spent his entire career trying to protect. In the original timeline, and Sengoku retires after Marineford, passing the torch to Sakazuki and stepping back as the Buddha who once held the chaos together. But in this timeline, Shanks' death drags him right back into the war room. You see, for Sengoku, this isn't just another Yonko losing. This is the canary in the coal mine dying. The one emperor who could walk into Marineford and make everyone stop suddenly gets erased by the very monster he warned them about. Let's dive into how differently these two men read that moment. Sengoku looks at Blackbeard and sees the ultimate consequence of the world government's hypocrisy. They used pirates like Doflamingo. They let the warlord system fester. They ignored Teach's rise until Marineford. Now the bill comes due. To him, Blackbeard is the living proof that managed evil doesn't stay managed. It mutates. Akainu? He sees something way harsher. To Sakazuki, Shanks dying is not a tragedy. It's confirmation. Absolute justice was right. You give pirates even an inch, you tolerate a peaceful Yonko like Shanks, and the result is an even worse devil stepping into the void. Why negotiate with someone who drinks sake with Whitebeard when you can just erase them all and be done with it? But what if Shanks' death forces even Akainu into a tactical nightmare he can't solve with magma alone? Because suddenly, Blackbeard isn't just a pirate, he's the dark gravity of the age. And Luffy, the boy Akainu personally scarred at Marineford, is the only one whose rise can match that pull. Here's the kicker. Does Sakazuki, the man of zero compromise, allow an unspoken, temporary tolerance of Luffy's growth? Not a deal. Not an alliance. I'm just looking the other way, while the Straw Hats tear into Blackbeard's network, sink his ships, and weaken his Yonko empire. Would he really order Kizaru to prioritize Teach's armada over a single Sunny on the horizon? Inside Marine HQ, that question fractures everything. Secret factions start to form in the shadows. On one side, the cold pragmatists weaponize Luffy against Teach, then eliminate whoever's left standing. On the other, the purists crush both as soon as they weaken each other, never let a second Roger or a second Rox breathe. So now picture that strategy board. 3 colors, 3 forces. Luffy's flag, Blackbeard's flag, and the world government's sigil. In this timeline, Shanks' death doesn't prevent the final war. It locks it in. And as the admirals quietly redraw their battle lines, as the Marines begin planning for a 3-way apocalypse they know is almost inevitable, the only question is, when that war finally erupts, which justice will fire the first shot? Buggy the Clown Emperor, accidental beneficiary of Shanks' death. And while the admirals are sketching out that 3-way apocalypse, the universe does something only one piece can pull off. It turns to a clown, literally. Because in this timeline, when Shanks falls to Blackbeard, the strangest winner on the board is Buggy the Clown Emperor. You see, in the original timeline, the world was already delusional about Buggy, former apprentice on Roger's ship, old friend of Shanks. Surrounded by monsters who actually do the work while he screams in the background. The Marines, the newspapers, out of the underworld. Everyone stitched those facts together and decided, yeah, this guy must be terrifying. But what if you remove Shanks from that equation? Suddenly, Buggy isn't just that clown who knew a Yonko. In this timeline, rumor fills the vacuum. People whisper that Buggy and Shanks were true rivals back on Roger's ship, that Shanks respected him, that Buggy survived Blackbeard where Shanks did not, because his flag is still flying while the red hair pirates are in mourning. Here's the kicker. None of that is true, but the world doesn't care. Morgan's runs headlines like, "Buggy, the man even Blackbeard won't touch." Marine officers, desperate to explain the chaos, quietly list Crossguild as a stabilizing Emperor force. And terrified rookies out in the New World look at Blackbeard's darkness, swallowing islands, and ask themselves a brutal question. Who can we run to that the Yonko and the Marines both hesitate to attack? The answer becomes Buggy. So smaller crews, failed supernovas, ex-warlord lackeys, they start flocking to his banner, not because they believe in his dream, because they think he's a walking insurance policy. Crossguild, which in the original timeline was a meme with bounties on Marines, suddenly turns into a legitimate power block by accident. Ports that would have gone to Shanks' protection money now reroute to Buggy's service fees. His Jolly Roger becomes a shield against Blackbeard's raids. And behind that ridiculous nose, 2 sharks smell blood in the water. Mihawk and Crocodile instantly understand the opportunity. With Shanks dead, one of the cleanest hockey monsters on the sea is gone. One of the most balanced, disciplined crews is leaderless. The Marines are staring at Blackbeard. Luffy is chasing his own destiny. So the swordsman who wants a quiet life, and the mastermind who once tried to seize Alabasta decide to weaponize the clown. They use Buggy's image as pure smokescreen. Mihawk tests Blackbeard's commanders in training duels, while the world thinks he's just guarding Buggy. Crocodile funnels desperate crews into Crossguild, then quietly folds their ports, routes, and intel networks into his own long game against both the Marines and Teach. Pattern interrupt time. Amidst Shanks' tragic death, Blackbeard's rise, and then Luffy's looming clash with destiny. The funniest wild card in the final war is this accidental emperor who can't control his own subordinates. Because when the storm finally hits, who does Buggy side with? Justice, chaos, or whoever looks scariest in the moment? Revolutionary army calculus, Dragon, Sabo, and the Pirate Civil War. And while everyone's arguing over which Emperor Buggy panics toward, someone else is watching the board, not the pieces. You see, for Dragon, Shanks' corpse isn't just a tragedy. It's a data point. In the original timeline, Shanks was one of the stabilizers of the sea, the quiet break on total chaos. But in this timeline, with Blackbeard standing over his body, the revolutionaries are forced to ask a terrifying question. Does a Teach-dominated ocean help the revolution, or kill it before it starts? And on paper, the Revolutionary Army doesn't care about pirate crowns. Their enemy is the world government, the celestial dragons, the system itself. Pirates are background noise, but what if the background suddenly becomes a roar? A Yonko who can absorb powers, weaponize fear, and ally with the worst parts of the government creates a world where common people are crushed between two monsters instead of one. Dragon looks at Shanks' death and instantly knows. The old balance of power that bought him time is gone. No more red-haired buffer between Teach and the throne. No more four emperors stalemate. The board is collapsing into a two-axis war. Blackbeard's Dark Empire versus the Holy Land. And the window for a clean, organized uprising just shrank from decades to years. Here's the kicker. That pressure doesn't make Dragon back off. Indeed, it accelerates him. If Blackbeard reaches Laugh-Tale first, seizes the ancient weapons, or hijacks whatever truth Roger found, then even a successful revolution against the celestial dragons might just hand the world to a different tyrant. So Dragon starts recalculating everything. Recruitment, timing, which kingdoms to ignite first, which to quietly evacuate before the storm. Now zoom in on Sabo. This is the guy who walked through the fires of Dressrosa, saw the celestial dragon slave system, and declared war by taking Ace's flame fruit. For him, the world government is the ultimate evil, no question. But when he hears that Shanks fell to Blackbeard, and that Luffy is now Teach's inevitable rival, his priorities twist in a really human way. And if the choice is a chaotic pirate era where Luffy accidentally tears down institutions while chasing freedom, or a meticulously organized nightmare where Blackbeard and Emu rule from opposite ends of the sky, which one do you all think Sabo picks? He's seen too much to trust order for its own sake. A messy age of Luffy-style freedom is still better than a perfectly efficient hell. That's where the quiet coordination begins. Not a formal revolutionary straw hat alliance banner, but subtle signals. Kuma's last instructions. Koala's intel, Dragon tracking Luffy's log poses, not to control him, but to make sure Blackbeard never gets a clean shot at the One Piece without a revolutionary front opening somewhere else. Let's dive into the wild part. Dragon starts planning operations to sync with the inevitable Luffy versus Blackbeard showdown. Imagine kingdoms rising up the same week those two clash. Imagine Mariéjois on fire while Laugh-Tale's secrets leak. When that final fight erupts, it won't just be a pirate duel. It'll be the opening bell of a multi-front revolution. The Dark Emperor Ascendant, Blackbeard's new myth and fear factor. And while Dragon is sketching out a global uprising, something even darker is being written on the seas. Because when Blackbeard kills Shanks, the revolution doesn't just gain a martyr, the pirate world gains a monster. Stories start spreading instantly, faster than any newspaper can print. Bartenders whisper it, transponder snails crackle with it. Blackbeard didn't just kill a Yonko. He killed the man who walked into Marineford, stopped the war with a sentence, and made 3 admirals back off with nothing but hockey and attitude. In the original timeline, Shanks' Marineford entrance becomes the symbol of, this is the ceiling, that's the guy you don't mess with. But in this timeline, every retelling of that scene now has a brutal new ending. You see that man who scared a Kainu into standing down? Yeah, Blackbeard erased him. Suddenly, the legend of Shanks becomes fuel for the legend of Teach. Here's the kicker. That's how Teach becomes the final boss in everyone's head long before Luffy ever reaches Laugh-Tale. This is a man who went from no-name on Whitebeard's crew to Impel Downbreaker to Marineford Hijacker to Yonko Killer in record time. Civilians in tiny East Blue villages tell their kids, if you see a black flag with 3 skulls, you run. Rookie captains look at the New World map and just cross out entire sea routes. Whole islands surrender before his ships even appear on the horizon. Because what if the rumors are true and he can sink a country with one punch? Fear becomes his greatest weapon. You don't need to fight if the enemy lays down their arms the second your Jolly Roger shows up. Marine Vice Admirals hesitate to engage him directly unless an admiral is present. Some even request reassignment when they hear Teach's fleet in their orders. The world government publicly calls him a threat to stability. But behind closed doors, the Gorosei are asking a terrifying question. Did they just trade Whitebeard's era for something worse? And yet, all this myth-making hides the cracks. Blackbeard still screams in agony when he's hit. He still relies heavily on his crew to cover his blind spots. He still overreaches when he's drunk on victory, like at Marineford when he taunted Sengoku and Garp. But fear glosses that over. When everyone believes you're unstoppable, even your stumbles look like part of some grand plan. So we end up with this twisted paradox. The more the world fears him, the less they notice how human he actually is, how exploitable he could be. And that's what sets up the real tension for the final saga of this timeline, because as the legend of Blackbeard the Dark Emperor grows, a quieter legend starts resurfacing alongside it. People remember the straw hat, the kid from Marineford who rang the ox bell, the boy Shanks bet his arm on. And slowly, the world starts to whisper that there's only one person left who can realistically stand against Blackbeard now. Luffy. But what if the future Pirate King isn't ready when Teach comes knocking? Training in the shadow of death, how Luffy levels up for Teach. So what happens when the world's last hope against Blackbeard is a rubber man who just watched his hero die? In the original timeline, Luffy's growth is wild and free. He gets stronger because adventure demands it, because the new world keeps throwing monsters at him. But in this timeline, everything changes the second Shanks falls to Teach. Luffy doesn't just want to be Pirate King, he wants the head of the man who stole his future duel. That means Gear 5 stops being just a playground. It becomes a weapon under construction. You see, and Luffy now trains with one name in mind, Marshal D. Teach. Every time he taps into Nika, he's not just bouncing around for fun. He's asking, how do you hit a man whose darkness can swallow your very existence? How do you shake a monster who already wields Whitebeard's earthquakes? So Luffy starts pushing his haki in a very specific direction. Advanced Conqueror's not just for clashing with Kaido anymore. It's refined to punch through nullification, to coat his body so intensely that even if Yami drags him in, his will doesn't get swallowed. Imagine Gear 5 Luffy turning his own heartbeat into a counterquake, syncing his rubber body with the rhythm of the Gura to ride, redirect, or even distort Blackbeard's shockwaves. But what if he doesn't walk this path alone? Suddenly, aren't the remnants of the red-haired pirates have nowhere else to place their bet, but on the kid Shanks believed in. Ben Beckman showing Luffy how to read a battlefield the way a sniper reads the wind. Yasop drilling Usopp and Luffy together, forcing them to sync observation haki until they can predict Teach's dirty tricks before they happen. And here's the kicker. Cross Guild enters the picture. Mihawk doesn't care about Teach ruling the seas, but he does care about balance and worthy opponents. In a twisted alliance, Luffy gets spars where his Gear 5 unpredictability clashes against the world's greatest blade. Not to kill, just to sharpen. Luffy learns how to fight without being grabbed, treating Blackbeard's hands like Mihawk's sword. One touch equals death. Even former enemies get pulled in. Now, Crocodile doesn't want a world where Teach controls everything. Doflamingo hates the Celestial Dragons, but doesn't want to bow to a new Dark Emperor. Luffy suddenly has a rogues gallery of sparring partners who specialize in crew synergy, deception, and psychological warfare. The exact things Blackbeard excels at. Emotionally, this training arc is different from anything we've seen. This isn't Dressrosa, Save the Country Luffy, or Wano, Free the Samurai Luffy. This is a man sharpening himself for one inevitable clash. Every laugh hides a wound. Every feast ends with him staring at the hat Shanks gave him, remembering that the promise to return it died on Teach's ship. From here on, every island is a drill. Every new ally is a future piece on the anti-Teach chessboard, and every time the drums of liberation start beating, and ladies and gentlemen, the world gets a little closer to the battlefield where Luffy and Blackbeard finally decide whose era this really is. The red-haired legacy plan. Messages, poneglyphs, and secret safeguards. But what if Shanks never intended his death to be the end of his influence at all, but the beginning of his real move? You see, a man who walked into Marineford and stopped the war with one sentence isn't walking around without a backup plan. In the original timeline, Shanks bets everything on Luffy living long enough to return that hat. But in this timeline, where Blackbeard steals that reunion, Shanks' contingency kicks in the moment his Vivor card burns out. Somewhere on the Red Force, Ben Beckman opens a sealed Den Den Mushi and a tone dial. Shanks' voice plays, calm but deadly serious, recorded years ago. He speaks directly to Luffy, but the message is meant to be delivered only if he dies before their promised meeting. And that alone tells you how dangerous he knew his path with Teach really was. What does Shanks tell him? Not coordinates to revenge. Warnings. The man with the darkness fruit, he's after more than just power. Hints about Laugh Tale. There's an answer waiting at the end of the world, but if you rush there blinded by anger, you'll lose everything Roger wanted you to see. Emotional guidance that hits harder than any punch. Don't throw away that smile for my sake. But here's the kicker. Shanks isn't just leaving words, he's leaving keys. Remember how obsessed the series is with inherited will and secret knowledge? Shanks, the man who sat on Roger's deck and listened to stories about the Void Century, could have safeguarded fragments of poneglyph information in ways only Luffy's crew can unlock. A tone dial that only reacts to Nami's log pose readings. Ink that becomes legible when Robin uses her Hana Hana no Mi to read overlapping copies at once. A map that only makes sense if Usopp uses observation hockey he hasn't fully mastered yet. In this timeline, Teach kills Shanks, but he doesn't get the full treasure Shanks was guarding, because the real treasure isn't on the Red Force. It's scattered in triggers and puzzles designed for Straw Hats, not monsters. Red-haired remnants become couriers of this legacy. Beckman, Yasopp, Rue, Hongo, all fanning out across the new world with one mission. Find the kid with the straw hat and tell him what the captain couldn't. Imagine the moment they finally catch up. Luffy raging, ready to sprint straight at Blackbeard, and instead of hyping revenge, Beckman hands him a poneglyph rubbing Shanks' stole from under the world government's nose and says, "He died, so you'd have this, not so you'd waste it." Instant emotional whiplash. Pattern interrupt. The story looks like it's about to become a pure revenge saga. And then Shanks, from beyond the grave, yanks the wheel. Even dead, he's steering the era, turning his own murder into the exact catalyst that arms Luffy with the knowledge, allies, and resolve he needs for the final war against both Teach and the world government. And that's when the world realizes they didn't just lose a Yonko, they activated his endgame. Final war rewritten, Shanks' absence on the ultimate battlefield. Shanks' endgame is activated, but he's not there to see it. And when the final war finally erupts, the absence hits you like a quake. No red-haired figure walking through the smoke. No quiet, "that's enough," that even admirals respect. Just chaos. Let's dive into this last battlefield. Picture a world where Luffy's alliance, Blackbeard's fleet, the world government's ultimate weapons, and the Revolutionary Army all move at once. Not in separate arcs, not in neat sagas. One timeline, one collision. The Holy Land is burning. The seas around it are a maelstrom of Yonko flags and marine banners, and everywhere you look, the ghosts of Marineford are replaying on a bigger, uglier scale. In the original timeline, Shanks walks into Marineford and the war just stops. Everyone freezes. Sengoku listens. Blackbeard backs off. Even the most bloodthirsty pirates pause, because this is the one man who can end a war with words. But in this timeline, that presence is gone. Blackbeard killed him. The legend that the man who stops wars will appear? Erased. Here's the kicker. Without Shanks, no one has that universal veto. Akainu isn't backing down. Imu and the Gorosei aren't stepping aside. Blackbeard sure isn't leaving without bodies. So when Luffy, Dragon, Sabo, the Straw Hats, the Worst Generation, and the Red Hair remnants all crash into the same theater, there's no natural off switch. Every front keeps escalating. Admirals versus commanders. God's knights versus revolutionary captains. Ancient weapons rumbling beneath the sea while Teach laughs in the middle of it all. What does that change? Everything. Collateral damage skyrockets. Evacuations that Shanks would have forced? They don't happen. Civilians in the Holy Land and marine families on nearby islands are suddenly in the blast radius of Gura Gura shockwaves, Nika's reality-bending punches, and celestial weapons the world government kept for its final stand. You see commanders begging for a ceasefire just to save their own people, and nobody with enough clout to make every side listen. So who inherits that role? Who becomes the new man who stops wars? It has to be Luffy. The kid who once cried on a cliff as Shanks sailed away now stands where his hero should have been. He's not just the wild card who breaks into Marineford anymore. He's the one everyone's watching to see if this era ends in liberation or annihilation. And that's the terrifying part. Luffy has to fight Blackbeard, topple the Celestial Dragons, and still know when to say, "This is where it ends." Does he spare Teach? Does he crush him? Does he negotiate a retreat so kids in the Holy Land don't die for a dream they never chose? Or does he push too far and become the monster Shanks died to prevent? Because now the final war isn't just about who reaches Laugh-Tale. It's about whether Luffy can end an era without becoming Blackbeard's mirror. And the next move he makes on that burning battlefield decides which legend the world remembers. Luffy versus Blackbeard, the duel framed by Shanks' blood. So when that burning battlefield finally cools, there's one clash everyone in this timeline is waiting for. Not the Marines versus the Emperors. Not Dragon versus the Celestial Dragons. It's Luffy versus Blackbeard, with Shanks' blood framing every single blow. By the time they meet, and both of them are true monsters of the sea. full-fledged emperors. Luffy as the sun that liberated nations from Wano to Mariejois. Blackbeard as the shadow that swallowed everything Marineford tried to protect. In the original timeline, their showdown is teased as a vague someday. But in this timeline, you see exactly why the world holds its breath. Each of them carries an era on his back, and the ghost of the red-haired man standing between them. Here's the kicker. Shanks isn't just a memory here, he's the wound Teach won't stop pressing. You can hear Blackbeard laughing, taunting Luffy about the man who bet everything on him. That fool thought you'd surpass him? I proved him wrong. Every quake, every darkness-coated punch is Blackbeard trying to prove that Shanks' faith was a joke. And every time Luffy's fist snaps back, and you see that kid from Fuchsia Village again, remembering Shanks' smile, the arm he lost, the hat placed on his head. Luffy isn't just angry, he's protecting a promise that started the entire story. Let's dive into the ideology behind those punches, because this isn't just a power-scaling slugfest. Luffy's freedom is noisy, messy, but it has rules. You don't crush someone else's dream to chase your own. That's why he saved countries, why he screamed at Marineford, why he refuses to be a king standing on corpses. Blackbeard's freedom is the exact opposite. To him, only the strong deserve anything, and taking what you want, devil fruits, territories, lives, is the only honest way to live. So when they clash, it's literally two definitions of the Great Pirate Era smashing together. An age of inherited wills versus an age of stolen power. And you know Oda would lace this duel with callbacks. Luffy, bloodied, grinning, repeating Shanks' line to Whitebeard's crew. Let's bet it on the next generation. Imagine him saying that to Teach's face, declaring that Shanks bet on Luffy, not on Blackbeard's darkness. Technique-wise, Luffy's Gear 5 tricks suddenly feel like love letters to Shanks' stories, fake-outs like a red-haired feint he heard about from Yasop, hockey bursts timed the way Shanks stopped Akainu's punch, even a moment where Luffy walks forward, unflinching, like Shanks did at Marineford when everyone else froze. So what's really at stake when that final punch winds up? It isn't just stopping a villain before he reaches Laugh Tale. It's answering the question this whole what-if has been building toward: did Shanks die for the right future? If Luffy wins here, it proves that Shanks' version of the Great Pirate Era, the one where you raise the next generation instead of devouring it, deserved to win. And if Luffy falters, even for a second, then Blackbeard wasn't just the man who killed Shanks. He becomes the man who killed his dream too. A world without Shanks. How the seas feel different forever. So what does a world without Shanks actually feel like? Not just the battlefield right after, but the seas 10, 20 years later, when the waves have had time to remember. This is where the timeline really twists the knife. At first, it's raw. Every bar from the West Blue to Wano has a red-haired story on repeat. People whisper about the Emperor who walked into Marineford, stopped a war, and then, in this timeline, walked into Blackbeard's darkness and never came back. And you see veterans telling the same scene again and again. The man who bet everything on a rubber boy, cut down by the man who wanted to swallow the age itself. But legends don't stay factual. They ferment. In the original timeline, Shanks is this elusive, living presence who might show up at any moment. In this timeline, he becomes something else. The tales get bigger. Kids hear that his hockey split the sky from Marineford to Mariejois, that when Blackbeard struck the final blow, the sea itself went silent. People start arguing over details, but everyone agrees on one thing. Shanks died gambling on Luffy, and you feel his absence in the tiniest cracks. A skirmish between two supernova crews that, before, would have ended in a shared drink because Shanks might be watching. Now it goes all the way to blood. A tense standoff between a Marine squad and a rookie Emperor that would have been diffused by a red-haired mediator. Suddenly, it turns into another mini Marineford. Fewer impromptu truces, more reckless clashes. That thin illusion that the Great Pirate Era still had a safety net? Gone. The era isn't wild with training wheels anymore. It's a free-fall. Here's the kicker. The next generation never knows him as a man. A fresh batch of rookies set sail hearing about Shanks the way Luffy once heard about Roger. Not as a Yonko you might bump into, but as the dividing line in history. Roger's execution started the Great Pirate Era. Shanks' death? That's when people say the final age began. Before Shanks fell, and after Shanks fell, become calendar terms. So what happens when Luffy finally reaches the top? When he stands as Pirate King, and his flag doesn't fly alone. It's chained to two shadows, Shanks' sacrifice and Blackbeard's betrayal. Every time Luffy laughs on the throne, there's that unspoken question. Did he honor the man who handed him the hat, or did Teach stain that dream forever? Even Luffy's greatest victories carry that extra weight, because the story of the Pirate King and the story of the red-haired Emperor are now permanently fused. But what if we cut the tragedy right there? Pattern interrupt. Because Shanks' will doesn't stay buried under Hachinosu. It leaks out into every captain who chooses mercy over massacre, into every ceasefire called over a shared bottle instead of a shared grave, into every kid who wears a straw hat, not to copy Luffy, but to spit in the face of tyranny. The world without Shanks hurts. Yet, every time someone bets on the next generation, instead of devouring it, the seas quietly answer back, he's gone, but he won. Alternate routes. What if Blackbeard killed Shanks at Marineford instead? But what if we rewind the tape, not to Elbaf, not to Laughtail, but back to that frozen moment at Marineford when Shanks walked through a sea of corpses and said, "This war is over." You see, in the original timeline, everyone backed down. Sengoku agreed. Blackbeard laughed it off and left. The curtain closed. But what if Teach didn't leave? Picture this. The cheering dies down, the cameras are still rolling, and suddenly, Blackbeard's grin twists. Instead of performing for the world, he goes for the jugular of the new era. While everyone's attention is on Whitebeard's body and the ceasefire, Blackbeard uses the smoke, debris, and panic as cover. Yami tendrils swallow the light. Shanks' observation, Haki flares. A fraction too late. In the original timeline, that was a clean ending, a full stop. In this timeline, it's a trap door. Blackbeard lunges in with Yami plus Gura, dragging Shanks into a gravity well right in the middle of the supposed ceasefire. Ben Beckman turns, Kizaru freezes for once, and the world's strongest Haki user is suddenly fighting for his life in the ashes of Whitebeard's grave. Instantly, Marineford's ending shatters. There is no dignified withdrawal. You get a three-way meat grinder, Whitebeard remnants refusing to let Teach defile another legend, Marines trying to contain a Yonko-on-Yonko assassination on live broadcast, and Blackbeard's crew going full hyena mode. Who do the pacifistas shoot? But does Sengoku protect Shanks or focus on executing pirates? Every chain of command breaks at once. And then imagine the worst case outcome. Shanks falls here, not on some distant battlefield after Luffy becomes a Yonko, but in front of the entire world, right after Ace dies. Luffy, barely conscious, already crushed by his brother's execution, watches the man who gave him his hat get swallowed by darkness and earthquakes. How do you even process that when you're still pre-time skip, bleeding out, nowhere near your Wano self? Does Luffy's will snap? Does he wake up later on Amazon Lily and just refuse to move? Or does it twist into something else entirely? An obsession? A desperate, vengeance-driven version of Luffy who doesn't just want to find One Piece, but to personally erase Blackbeard from the timeline? But what happens to that goofy smile when the two pillars of his childhood, Ace and Shanks, are both taken by the same war? Here's the kicker. As wild as that is, it actually makes Shanks' death smaller. It becomes one more tragedy in the Marineford pileup, one more trauma Luffy has to rehab from. Compare that to Shanks dying later, after meeting Yonko Luffy, after Elbaf-level alliances, after the hat is on the table between them as equals. Which hits harder, a hero dying before you're ready, or a rival mentor dying after you've finally caught up? By jumping timelines like this, you really feel it. Marineford Shanks dying would be catastrophic. But Shanks dying in Luffy's true era? That's not just pain. That's a fuse for the final war. And speaking of fuses, let's dive into how Blackbeard killing Shanks at the height of the Yonko era completely rewrites the balance of the seas. Another branch. Post-Wano interception versus final war assassination. Because here's where timing turns from flavor into fate. We've been riding with the post-Wano ambush branch, where Blackbeard hunts Shanks on purpose. But what if Teach waits? Picture this. The final war has already exploded. Luffy, Dragon, the Revolutionary Army, former warlords, everyone charging the Holy Land. The red-haired pirates are on the front lines, Shanks clashing with an admiral and God's knights in a chaos Marineford could never reach. In the original timeline, Shanks walks into Marineford and stops a war. In this timeline, he dives into the last war and never walks out. Blackbeard doesn't announce himself. No, he doesn't need theatrics. While Shanks is fully locked on Saturn, Kizaru, or some celestial monster, Teach uses the battlefield like a smokescreen. Yami swallows the sky, gravity buckles, and a quake fist blindsides Shanks while he's already bleeding from the front. Is that a duel? Or is that a drive-by on history? Shanks still dies. The world still shakes. But the meaning is different. It feels like a tragic casualty of the apocalypse. Not an era-defining execution chosen by Teach. The headlines read, "Red-haired Shanks falls in holy war," not "Blackbeard slays the Red Emperor." You see the difference? Shanks' death becomes one of many flames in a burning world, not the spark that ignited it. Now jump back to the post-Wano interception we've been focused on. No final war yet. The seas are tense, the Yonko system is wobbling, but the powder keg hasn't blown, and Blackbeard makes a decision. He will not wait for chaos. He will create it. He hunts Shanks specifically. He wants those scars to come full circle. He wants the world to watch the man who once stopped Marineford get stopped by him. Here's the kicker. In the late war version, Teach is opportunistic. In the post-Wano version, he's prophetic. He chooses Shanks as his stepping stone to ultimate fear and power, killing the symbol of safe Yonko balance before Luffy is truly ready. That choice rewrites who owns the new era. Is it the boy Shanks believed in, or the monster who murdered him? And for Luffy, earlier versus later is everything. If Shanks dies mid-final war, Luffy is already Gear 5, already a living drumbeat of liberation. He has no prep time, no mourning arc. I'd just instant rage, fueling a battle he was going to fight anyway. It's Ace at Marineford all over again, but on God-tier difficulty. After Wano, though, Luffy has a gap. Enough time for grief, for training, for strategy with the Straw Hats, for vows made at Shanks' empty seat. Does he chase Teach immediately? Does he forge alliances with Kid's remnants, with Law, with the revolutionaries because he refuses another Marineford? In almost every branch, Blackbeard killing Shanks breaks the world. But the earlier it happens, the more it warps Luffy's entire endgame. So what happens when that broken world still has to crown a pirate king, and the throne is now soaked in red and darkness? Viewer checkpoint, stitching the timelines and what-ifs together. So let's hit pause for a second. We've been sprinting through chaos. So we need to stitch this main timeline together before we dive into the emotional kill shot. Because in this timeline, everything hinges on one brutal public moment. Post-Wano Shanks finally sails into Luffy's life, and Blackbeard turns that reunion into an execution. Context first. After Wano, Luffy is fresh off defeating Kaido, the world is buzzing, and Shanks appears not as a distant legend, but as a real, living mentor rival stepping onto the same stage. In the original timeline, that reunion is delayed, teased, always just out of reach. But what if Shanks actually shares a drink with Luffy, laughs with the crew, maybe even passes on one last hint about Laugh Tale, and then Teach crashes the party? We followed that core route. Blackbeard ambushes Shanks in front of witnesses. He drags the red-haired pirates into a nightmare matchup of Yami and Gura versus peak hockey monsters, and turns a private grudge into a global broadcast. Shanks falls, not in a quiet duel at the end of the world, but as a spectacle that instantly rewrites the balance of power. The consequences stack fast. The red-haired pirates are shattered. Ben Beckman and the veterans either die holding the line or scatter into a hunted resistance. Blackbeard's myth skyrockets. He's now the man who killed Whitebeard, stole his power, and then erased the Yonko who once stopped Marineford. You see how that snowballs? Every pirate bar, every marine briefing, every Revolutionary War room is suddenly asking the same thing. If Shanks couldn't stop Teach, who can? And right at the center of that storm is Luffy, his childhood hero. But the man who gave him the straw hat and bet his arm on his future is murdered by the final enemy he was always destined to face. Luffy's motivation sharpens into something we almost never see from him. Grief that doesn't fade and rage that doesn't burn out. He's still chasing the Pirate King dream, but now the dream is welded to one absolute. Blackbeard must fall. Here's the kicker. That's just one universe in this project. We also sketched the Marineford kill, where Shanks dies the day he stops the war, and the final war assassination, where Teach snipes him right before the last clash with the world government. Each branch hits a different nerve. Early Marineford Shanks' death gives us a broken, directionless Luffy, Ace trying to fill the void, and a Yonko system that collapses overnight. And at late final war, Shanks' death pushes Luffy to finish the story with no safety net, no red-haired guardian watching his back. But all of them circle the same question. How does the death of Luffy's original hero, at the hands of his ultimate enemy, reshape the meaning of the Great Pirate Era? Does Roger's execution still feel like the true beginning? Or does Shanks' blood become the real signal flare that this age is no longer about adventure, but about settling a cosmic score? Pattern interrupt time. Forget the power scaling for a moment. Forget who beats who. What does it do to the inherited will theme when the man who carried Roger's will into the next generation is cut down? And that will passes directly into Luffy through trauma, not nostalgia? That's the lens we're taking into the next part. We've locked in our main line, post-Wano reunion, public Shanks execution, a world tilting into a darker final era. Now let's dive into what that does to Luffy's heart. to the Pirate King dream, and to the final war when it's built on loss instead of legend. Would Luffy still become Pirate King without Shanks alive? So the real question hanging over this entire what if is brutal and simple. Does Shanks dying here kill Luffy's Pirate King dream, or sharpen it into a weapon? In the original timeline, that straw hat is a promise. In this timeline, it becomes an epitaph. You see, Luffy's dream has always been wildly selfish and deeply selfless at the same time. He wants to be Pirate King because that's the freest man on the seas. But what if the man who defined freedom for him is executed in chains, as broadcast to the world by the same monster Luffy is destined to fight? Does that make him hesitate, or does it flip a switch? We know this kid. This is the guy who watched Ace die and came back hungrier, not smaller. Remember Marineford? Luffy was shattered, but he didn't quit. Jinbei, Rayleigh, and the memory of Ace pushed him forward. Now replace Ace's sacrifice with Shanks' annihilation. Replace a brother's death in war with a mentor's execution in cold blood. Luffy's core trait is refusing to let a friend's sacrifice be wasted. That's his entire operating system. So when Blackbeard parades Shanks' corpse as proof that dreams are dead, Luffy's response isn't to abandon his goal. It's to hardlock it. One Piece stops being a distant treasure and becomes the proof that Shanks was right to believe in him. Here's the kicker. His end goal subtly changes. Being Pirate King is still about freedom, but now it's also about security. Not for himself, but for the next generation of brats staring at the sea the way he once did. In this darker era, Luffy's dream evolves into creating a world where no Blackbeard can publicly erase a symbol of hope like that ever again. He's not trying to be the next Roger. He's trying to be the last era where this kind of tragedy is possible. So what does Luffy's Pirate King era look like in this timeline? It's louder, harsher, more bittersweet. Every feast on the Sunny, every victory over a Yonko, every clash with the world government carries a shadow. The empty seat at the bar where Shanks should have been. That moment where, in the original timeline, he would have returned the hat. Gone. And the hat stays on his head forever, ladies and gentlemen, because there's no one left to give it back to. But that's exactly why this doesn't break him. It crowns him. Shanks' faith is no longer a quiet memory from Fuchsia Village. It's the fuel for the final war. If Luffy can turn that pain into a better era than Roger, Whitebeard, or even Shanks ever managed, then Blackbeard's greatest victory becomes the spark of his ultimate defeat. And that's the thread we're pulling next. What happens when a Nika-awakened Luffy marches into the final battle, not just as a dreamer, but as the living answer to Shanks' last gamble? Teach's possible end. Does killing Shanks seal Blackbeard's fate? Because once Luffy becomes the living answer to Shanks' last gamble. Gosh, there's one question hanging over this entire timeline. What if Blackbeard is the one who rips that gamble away? If Teach actually kills Shanks, does he win the game, or does he just press the self-destruct button on his own era? You see, the second Shanks falls to Blackbeard, Teach doesn't just take a Yonko seat, he paints a cosmic bullseye on his back. Luffy's rage alone would shake the seas. But it wouldn't end there. The red-haired remnants, Ben Beckman, and the surviving officers instantly become a revenge army. The Marines can't ignore it because a pirate who killed Whitebeard and Shanks is now the undisputed face of chaos. The revolutionaries see the same thing. A walking catastrophe the world government keeps allowing to grow. In the original timeline, Blackbeard rises by striking in the shadows, killing Thatch, and betraying Whitebeard, stealing the Gura Gura. But in this timeline, when he adds Shanks' blood to that list, every sin converges. Former Whitebeard commanders, Shanks' scattered allies, Sword, even opportunistic pirates like Kid or Law, who hate the Yonko system itself, all of them suddenly share one common obstacle. Blackbeard becomes the final raid boss of the old world. Let's dive into the narrative symmetry for a second. Teach starts as the rat in Whitebeard's home, then becomes the vulture at Marineford, then the hyena that finally drags down the red lion. He feeds on legends. But what happens when the legends he fed on become the reason every faction unites against him? That's the irony. The more he wins, the more the entire timeline bends toward his destruction. And here's the kicker. The poetic justice writes itself. Imagine Luffy, Nika awakened, walking into that last battlefield with techniques and instincts shaped by Shanks. The way he stands between his crew and danger. The way he throws his hat to someone to protect. The way he laughs in the face of impossible odds. Luffy beating Teach, not just with rubber and hockey, but with the very philosophy Shanks died for, turns Blackbeard's greatest triumph into the seed of his defeat. Or go even darker. Blackbeard dies buried under the same kind of world-shattering quake he once used to humiliate Marineford, crushed by the chaos he unleashed. His own crew backstabs him mid-apocalypse, mirroring what he did to Whitebeard, while Luffy delivers the final blow that shatters the era. So how would the world remember him? As the Emperor of Terror, or as the monster whose existence forced Luffy, Dragon, Garp, and even rogue Marines to finally snap the world government's cycle in half? What if history books call him the last tyrant of the old world, the final storm before the sun? Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's the real paradox. In trying to steal Shanks' place in history, does Teach actually lock himself into a different role? The villain everyone must erase to let the new dawn rise? And if that's true, who lands the strike that turns Blackbeard from untouchable emperor into the final offering to the next era? Emotional payoff. Why this what if hurts so much, and why it's so compelling. And that's where this hurts the most, because Shanks isn't just a cool Yonko with crazy hockey. He's the feeling of that very first episode. He's the bar in Fuchsia Village, the shared sock cup, the goofy red-haired pirate who laughed with a kid and said, "You'll surpass me one day." In the original timeline, Shanks is the promise of a reunion, a joyful rematch, a future-sake toast on the sunny. Killing him doesn't just remove a character, it weaponizes nostalgia against you. You see, every time Luffy smiles through pain, a little part of that strength traces back to Shanks betting his arm on the next era. So when Blackbeard is the one who erases him, it feels like the series' warmest memory just got fed into a black hole. The hat that meant "see you again" suddenly becomes a gravestone. That's why this timeline hits so hard emotionally. It takes the safest, coziest part of One Piece and drops Teach's flag right on top of it. And here's the kicker. Blackbeard is the perfect narrative opposite to Shanks. Shanks is discipline, odds restraint, a Yonko who stops Marineford instead of igniting it further. Teach is greed, chaos, the man who used Marineford to announce himself. One protects the balance, the other exploits it. So when they finally clash, it doesn't feel random, it feels inevitable. Like the story has been pulling these two magnets together since the day Shanks got those scars. In this timeline, that inevitability turns fatal. And that's horrifying. But what if that's exactly why it's so compelling? Because you're watching the embodiment of inherited will and quiet sacrifice get crushed by the embodiment of selfish freedom. Shanks gives up his arm, his status, his safety to nurture the next era. Teach takes everything to crown himself king of the ruins. Let's dive into what that does to Oda's themes. One Piece is already about the cost of chasing freedom in a cruel world. Ace dies because he refuses to run. Whitebeard dies standing. If Blackbeard kills Shanks, it's like the series doubling down and saying, even your childhood hero isn't safe from this sea. Inherited will doesn't become softer. It becomes sharper. Luffy's dream stops being just fun adventure and leans harder into, I will end the man who devoured my future. And yet, as dark as this is, the storytelling potential is insane. Imagine Luffy reaching Laugh-Tale not to share a drink with Shanks, but to fulfill his will. Imagine the final war framed as Shanks' era stolen, Luffy's era reclaimed. The stakes are instantly higher, the emotions rawer, the victory's way more cathartic. So if one death can twist nostalgia into rage, turn a reunion into revenge, and rewrite the entire balance of the Yonko, what other single moments could shatter the age of pirates and create a completely new era from the rubble? Recap. From red-haired hope to Blackbeard's dark era. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the monster we just built together. We started with a single crack in the story. What if the scar across Shanks' eye wasn't just a warning about Blackbeard, but a promise? In the original timeline, that scar is backstory. In this timeline, it's foreshadowing for a murder that reshapes the sea. We traced their history all the way back. Young Teach quietly studying under Whitebeard, Shanks rising from cabin boy to emperor, both men circling each other for decades. Then we jump to the post-Wano world, where the Yonko balance is already fragile. Instead of peace talks and sake cups, Blackbeard chooses an ambush. No Marineford crowd, no Marines to stop it. Just darkness, gravity, and a red-haired emperor walking straight into his final trap. Shanks doesn't go down easy. His hockey tears through the sky, his crew fights like demons, and for a moment it looks like the legend wins. But what if Teach, with Yami and Gora mastered, is finally ready for the clash he dodged at Marineford? In this timeline, that warning Shanks gave him at the war comes full circle. and ends with Shanks brutalized, his ship shattered, and Blackbeard roaring that a new era begins with red blood on white decks. From there, the fallout hits everyone. The red-haired pirates don't just vanish. They fracture, scarred, but burning with inherited will. Bin Beckman, Yasopp, the veterans and rookies, they become wandering sparks of Shanks' dream. Backing Luffy, sabotaging Teach, spreading the truth about what really happened. The world doesn't just lose a Yonko, it loses its most stable pillar. For Luffy, this isn't just another headline, this is Ace all over again, but worse. Ace died in front of him at Marineford, Shanks dies far away, and Luffy has to imagine every second. That carefree adventurer who once shouted about being king of the pirates because it sounded fun, he's still goofy, still smiling, but now he's carrying 2 ghosts and a promise carved deeper than any scar. Blackbeard is the enemy he must defeat. And the macro consequences? Insane. The Yonko system implodes, the final war accelerates, and suddenly, the Revolutionary Army and the Marines both have to recalculate everything. Unto the Gorosei let Blackbeard reach Laugh Tale if he's the only thing keeping Luffy and Dragon in check? Do the admirals target, teach, or protect their own crumbling order? You see, once Shanks is gone, every faction is forced to move early. Here's the kicker. Blackbeard isn't just racing Luffy to Laugh Tale anymore. He's racing there with Shanks' blood on his hands, turning the final island into a graveyard of unfinished eras. So now that we've walked through this entire dark timeline together, from childhood scars to stolen eras, what other single what-if moments do you think could flip One Piece on its head like this? Which pivot would you rewrite next? Your turn. Would you accept a One Piece where Shanks dies to Blackbeard? So now it's your turn, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be honest with yourselves for a second. Do you actually think Oda would ever kill Shanks on panel? And if he did, do you feel like Blackbeard is the only character in the entire story worthy of landing that final blow? Or could you accept someone else carrying that weight? In the original timeline, Shanks is this untouchable red-haired guardian who walks into Marineford and instantly stops the war with one sentence. But what if that same man, the one who bet his arm on Luffy's future, is the one who gets a raise to hype up Teach as the final monster of the sea? Drop it in the comments. Yes or no? Would you accept a One Piece where Shanks dies to Blackbeard? Or does that cross the line for you? Let's dive into Luffy for a second. You see, this isn't just some random Yonko dying. This is the guy who put the hat on his head. Aunt who told him to meet him out on the seas. So how do you think Luffy actually reacts in this timeline? Does he stay the same smiling idiot who laughs off pain? Or does that smile crack for real? Do you see him going full Darker era Luffy? No more holding back, no more goofy mercy, just a ruthless sprint straight at Blackbeard no matter who stands in the way? Picture it. News of Shanks' death hits the Sunny. In one route, Luffy breaks down, then stands up with that Marineford resolve times 10. In another, he goes quiet, like post-Ace. But this time, there's no Jinbei speech to pull him back instantly. Comment how you think he changes. Does he still dance in Gear 5? Or does Nika become something a little more terrifying when it's aimed at the man who killed his hero? Now timing, that's huge. Would a post-Wano Shanks death, he's right when Luffy has just been crowned an emperor, hit you the hardest? Or do you think this should have been a Marineford follow-up, with Blackbeard ambushing Shanks right after the war and stealing the spotlight from Whitebeard's era? Or do you want it saved for the absolute end, a final war execution where Shanks dies in front of Luffy and Teach, turning the last battle into pure inherited will rage? And if you don't like our version, rewrite the timeline in the comments. But what if Shanks survives the fight, yet loses an arm, an eye, or his crew gets wiped instead? What if Blackbeard actually loses here, is forced to retreat, and that humiliation changes his whole path to Laugh Tale? Tell us your wildest Shanks versus Blackbeard outcomes, because we're not done twisting eras yet. If this was the What If Shanks Dies branch. But next time we're asking what happens if a different legend never falls at all? There's another single moment that can shatter the entire endgame, and it's one Oda already showed us once, then took away. Obam. And it's one Oda already showed us once, then took away. So here's the kicker. You've just seen what happens when Blackbeard kills Shanks. But what if this is only one broken branch of Marineford's shadow, and we keep snapping the others one by one? If you want us to dive into even crazier timelines, you see what you have to do. Hit like right now, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next era we destroy. Because we can jump straight into What If Ace Lived, and the war ends with Whitebeard's son standing beside Luffy, not on a coffin, but on the Moby Dick, swearing to burn the world government's flag himself. Or we can go to What If Garp Turned on the Marines, where that one step at the execution platform suddenly becomes the punch that cracks Marineford in half. In the original timeline, Marineford already changed everything. But in this timeline, you decide which scar we reopen first. Drop a comment and tell us, do you want Ace walking out of Marineford alive, Garp throwing away his justice, or Luffy awakening Gear 5 right there on the scaffold? Check the poll, vote for your branch, and turn this whole series into an interactive map of One Piece's most dangerous decision points. Because every tiny change matters. 1 second of hesitation from Garp, 1 order from Sengoku that never comes, 1 moment where Shanks is a minute late, or Blackbeard is a step closer, and the Great Pirate Era instantly becomes unrecognizable. What if Dragon actually appears in the sky above Marineford? What if Kaido really does crash the war instead of being stopped off screen? What if Ace lives long enough to see Luffy as Nika before the final clash? Ladies and gentlemen, through all of these dark branches, one thread never truly breaks. Shanks' faith in Luffy. Even when we kill him off, even when Blackbeard steals his era, that straw hat is still a promise. It's the one thing that says the story is allowed to be cruel, but it can't erase hope. In canon, Shanks bets his arm on Luffy. In this timeline, he bets his life, and that faith becomes the fuel that turns Luffy's grief into a storm. So here's what we're doing. You choose the next fracture. Ace lives, Garp defects, or Gear 5 explodes at Marineford and terrifies the entire world overnight. Tell us in the comments. Share your wildest headcanons. And if you want this series to keep going, make sure you're subscribed so you're on board for every new branch. Because in any timeline, one thing doesn't change. Somewhere out there, a straw hat is still sailing toward the end of the world. And we're going to keep asking what happens if everything goes differently.